Warrior Lore. Chapter 804. The eyes of the leader, an old man with an unremarkable appearance, began to fluctuate. Reninging and the others didn't say a word when Du Xiaofu and the extraordinary young man started their fight. They were all watching the fight between Du Xiaofu and the extraordinary young man. Yi Lin, stop. Reninging finally opened her mouth and looked at the extraordinary young man. Saintus, what's wrong with killing an ant from the outside world? The extraordinary young man said. His terrifying aura continued to suppress Du Xiaofu. However, with Du Xiaofu's love for the grass of immortality, it wasn't easy for the extraordinary young man to suppress Du Xiaofu completely. He only had the upper hand now. I said, stop. Do you need me to say it again? Rening's gaze sharpened. Her lips curled into a cold smile, making her look even more holy and majestic. Boom. Hearing this, the extraordinary young man looked at Du Xiaofu coldly. He forcefully pushed Du Xiaofu away and started to retreat. Du Xiaofu took advantage of the situation and retreated a little. He didn't continue to fight. He retracted his aura and stared at Reninging. From Reninging's scolding just now, Du Xiaofu knew that these people seemed to have a special relationship with Reninging. It was different from what he had imagined. Greetings, Saintus. The extraordinary young man landed and bowed respectfully to Reninging. Greetings, Saintus. Dozens of people bowed respectfully. Their gazes were filled with reverence. An invisible aura could distort the surrounding space. They are your men? Du Xiaofu looked at Reninging. He had already guessed that the woman in front of him was unfathomable and had an extraordinary background. However, when he saw the powerful aura and the respectful attitude towards Reninging, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but be shocked. These people were not simple. It was not difficult for Du Xiaofu to know that Reninging's background was deeper than he had imagined. Reninging nodded towards Du Xiaofu. A strange light flashed through Ling Hui's eyes as she said, "It seems that I can't accompany you to the Migres Palace. I have to go home." Du Xiaofu looked at the holy and dignified woman. He did not know why, but he suddenly felt uncomfortable. His eyes widened as he said, "You're going back?" "Yes." Reninging nodded slightly. She looked at the young man in front of her and said, "I still have my own things to do. I can't come out often." Du Xiaofu's eyes flashed with a trace of sadness. "Then let's go back. When I'm done with my business, I'll go find you." "Why are you looking for me?" Reninging gazed deeply at Du Xiaofu, her bright eyes flashing with splendor. Du Xiaofu was taken aback by the question. He then said, "When I'm done, I can find you to eat barbecue and drink wine." Reninging could not help but burst into laughter when she heard this. Her smile was enough to make all living things fall. She said, "Is that all?" After speaking, Reninging looked at Du Xiaofu. She bit her red lips and said, "Actually, the name Reninging was made up by me. I already knew. The next time you want to deceive someone, pay attention to retracting your aura. Otherwise, it will be very easy to be discovered." Du Xiaofu looked at the holy and dignified woman before him and smiled. In his heart, he already knew who this woman was. After being together for so long, Du Xiaofu was no fool. He was naturally able to guess that familiar aura. However, he was still somewhat suspicious. "You actually knew? Then why didn't you tell me?" When Reninging heard this, she was very surprised. She felt that she had hidden it well and thought that Du Xiaofu would not discover it. "Since you didn't tell me, I couldn't be bothered to ask. Also, the fragrance on your body hasn't changed. I'll know once I smell it." Du Xiaofu smiled. This woman in front of him was none other than Qi Yeshi from Tianwu Academy. Reninging was just a name she made up. "You?" Hearing this, Qi Yeshi seemed to have thought of something. Her cheeks flushed red, and she glared fiercely at Du Xiaofu. "Hee." Du Xiaofu chuckled. He did not know why this woman would suddenly glare at him. He then asked Qi Yeshi in confusion, "Why did you change your appearance?" "I couldn't tell at all." Qi Yeshi glared at Du Xiaofu helplessly and said in annoyance, "This is my original appearance. My appearance when I was in the academy is because my family has some special methods to change my appearance. It's extremely difficult to be discovered." "I see." Du Xiaofu felt as if he had been enlightened. She looked at Du Xiaofu with deep meaning in her eyes. Qi Yeshi then passed Little Star to Du Xiaofu and said, "I'm leaving." Take good care of little star. If you dare to bully it, I won't let you off easily." After taking little star from Qi Yeshi's arms, Du Xiaofu looked at the woman in front of him and nodded. "I'm leaving. Take good care of yourself and improve your strength. I'm still waiting for your wealthy family." As soon as Qi Yeshi finished speaking, her delicate body moved. She tapped her foot lightly on the ground, and her graceful body suddenly rose from the ground and floated in midair. That beautiful figure's hair fluttered in the wind. The moonlight shrouded her, making her look holy and majestic. Swoosh, swoosh. As Qi Yeshi left, several figures immediately followed behind her. The extraordinary young man called Yi Lin glared fiercely at Du Xiaofu and said, "Brat, my name is Yi Lin. Remember it well." As soon as he finished speaking, he also rose into the air. Du Xiaofu said to Yi Lin's back, "My name is Qiao Feng." Only the last unprepossessing old man remained on the mountain peak. He looked at Du Xiaofu and smiled at Du Xiaofu. Then, he staggered his body and left. Swoosh, swoosh. One figure after another flew into the sky and disappeared into the depths of the night. Ao, ao. Little Star raised its head and looked in the direction that Qi Yeshi had left. Its throat was full of ao, ao sounds. Its eyes were motionless as it waited for the beautiful figure to disappear. It seemed to be reluctant to part with her. Ingrate, she left. Does it feel a little uncomfortable? After a while, Du Xiaofu stroked Little Star in his arms. His gaze also fell on the distant sky. There was a complicated look in his eyes, and there was a little loneliness. At this moment, there was a little bit of dawn in the sky. A gray ray of light pierced through the hazy brown sky. Then, the sky was filled with red clouds. The light of the rising sun was dazzling. "It's time for us to leave." Early in the morning, Du Xiaofu placed Little Star on his shoulder. His figure jumped on the mountain peak. Every time he jumped, there was a mountain peak below him. Several days later, the mountain range stretched on endlessly. The lush greenery covered the vast buildings. "Find them. No matter what, we must find those young men and women. Yuheng Hall will not let them off easily." In the mountain range, there was a large hall. A thunderous roar came out from it. In the bustling crowd, the streets were noisy. The clamor of hawking resounded through the clouds. This was a huge city called White Horse City. It was unknown how far away it was from Chujiang City. On the street, Du Xiaofu walked while holding Little Star in his arms. With a pained expression, he muttered, "What a prodigal. He's even more of a prodigal than Du Xiaoyao. All he does is eat." Little Star seemed to be used to Du Xiaofu's nagging. He didn't care about Du Xiaofu at all. He raised his head and glanced at Du Xiaofu before continuing to eat the elixir in his mouth. Heavenly Treasure Pavilion. Suddenly, Du Xiaofu stopped outside a shop and said softly, "I'm still missing one last material. This is the third shop. I hope I can buy it." After saying that, Du Xiaofu walked into the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion. This was a huge shop. It sold a dazzling array of cultivation resources. The fragrance of medicine assailed the nostrils. There were ripples of energy and multicolored light spread out. Goo goo. Sensing the aura of the elixir, Little Star's throat immediately made a goo goo sound, and his golden eyes rolled around. Inside the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion, there were also many cultivators choosing cultivation resources. From time to time, the sound of bargaining could be heard. Business was booming. "Sir, is there anything I can help you with?" As Du Xiaofu walked into the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion, a passionate shop assistant came up to him with a smile. He looked quite smart. "I want to find Vajra black copper. Do you have it here?" Du Xiaofu asked. The reason he came to the Myriad Treasure Pavilion was to find a refining material called Vajra black copper. Although Vajra black copper was not a top-grade, priceless refining material, it was extremely rare. There were not many weapon symbol masters who needed to use Vajra black copper, because in most cases, they could use other materials that were similar to replace Vajra black copper. Therefore, one might not be able to find Vajra black copper in ordinary shops. Vajra black copper. The quick-witted shop assistant pondered for a moment, then said to Du Xiaofu, "Sir, please wait a moment. This Vajra black copper is very rare. I will ask our shopkeeper." "Go. I'll wait here." Du Xiaofu nodded, and the shop assistant immediately left. After that, Du Du Xiaofu looked around the myriad treasure pavilion. Many of the treasures were of high quality and were expensive. A few of them even tempted Du Xiaofu. Suddenly, just as Du Xiaofu was looking around, he felt a gaze shoot over. This gaze seemed to have some subtle fluctuations. Du Xiaofu immediately raised his head to look. Not far away, an old man in his 60s who looked like a spirit symbol master was looking at little star in his arms. It's 6 o'clock, there's still more, but it'll probably be late at night. Everyone, save it for tomorrow. Don't worry. Chapter 805. The old man's figure was extremely thin, like a skinny monkey. The robe on his body seemed extremely empty. However, although the aura on the old man's body was intentionally hidden, it could not escape Du Xiaofu's prying. That invisible aura was extremely extraordinary. Seeing Du Xiaofu's gaze, the old man smiled at Du Xiaofu. This smile was extremely warm, but in Du Xiaofu's eyes, he frowned slightly. After nodding with a smile, the old man turned around and continued to choose cultivation resources in the Sky Treasure Pavilion. Sir, our shopkeeper invites you to the VIP room for a detailed discussion. Just as Du Xiaofu was frowning, the quick-witted shop assistant who had just left came forward again and gestured for Du Xiaofu to head to the VIP room. Du Xiaofu nodded and retracted his gaze from the old man. He followed the quick-witted shop assistant and arrived at the VIP room of the Thousand Treasure Pavilion. The VIP room was in the depths of the business. From Du Xiaofu's secret prying, there were quite a few glyph formations in the surroundings that were not of a low level. Du Xiaofu felt that the glyph formations set up in the dark by the Thousand Treasure Pavilion were not inferior to the ones set up by the Chujiang Royal Palace a few days ago. It was enough to show that the Thousand Treasure Pavilion was extremely powerful. When Du Xiaofu entered the VIP room, he casually stuffed little Xingxing into his clothes. His gaze intentionally or unintentionally swept across the inner hall. Sir, are you looking for Vajra black copper? An old man in a long gown raised his head and looked at Du Xiaofu. His gaze was clear, and he had an extraordinary aura. Perfect 5-star glyph master. Du Xiaofu probed the aura of this old man. He had reached the level of a perfect 5-star glyph master. This level of glyph master cultivation was already extremely impressive. If it was in the outside world, a perfect 5-star glyph master would be treated well by a country. But in the Wanbao Pavilion, he was only a shopkeeper. I need Vajra black copper. Does the shopkeeper have it? Du Xiaofu nodded to the old man. Vajra black copper was something he couldn't do without. Please forgive this old man for asking, but do you intend to use this Vajra black copper for yourself? Or are you buying it for someone else? The shopkeeper asked Du Xiaofu. He was sizing up Du Xiaofu openly. For my own use. Because I need to refine some things. I lack Vajra black copper. Although Du Xiaofu was a little surprised, the shopkeeper had asked him openly. After a slight hesitation, Du Xiaofu nodded his head in response. Although the Vajra black copper is not a rare treasure, it is still extremely rare. Generally speaking, only those who have reached the cultivation level of a 6-star symbol master are able to refine the Vajra black copper. I didn't expect that at such a young age, you've already reached the level of a 6-star talisman master. This old man is truly ashamed. The old shopkeeper looked at Du Xiaofu with a complicated gaze. There was a hidden meaning in his words. He was clearly trying to find out Du Xiaofu's identity and cultivation level. I only want to buy Vajra black copper. If the shopkeeper does not want to sell it to me, just say so. I can find another buyer. Du Xiaofu's gaze slightly moved as his expression darkened. The shopkeeper's probing words caused Du Xiaofu to become somewhat vigilant. Little brother, please be at ease. Shopkeeper Huang has some special reasons for asking too much. Please forgive him. A voice sounded from the inner hall of the VIP room. Soon after, Du Xiaofu glanced sideways as a middle-aged man walked out. He had a slender figure and bright eyes. He wore a long brocade robe. When the middle-aged man appeared, he waved his hand slightly. The shopkeeper, who looked to be in his 50s, immediately retreated respectfully to the side. Du Xiaofu looked at the middle-aged man before him. His gaze moved slightly as he raised his head slightly to size him up openly. The middle-aged man smiled as he looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Let me introduce myself first. My name is Shangguan He, and I'm the pavilion master of the 10,000 treasure pavilion. I should be slightly older than you. If you don't feel that you're at a disadvantage, you can just call me Brother Shangwan. Pavilion Master Shangwan and I are strangers. You're making me feel uneasy by being so courteous. Why don't we get straight to the point? Du Xiaofu looked at Shangwan He as he concealed his aura. However, Du Xiaofu could still sense that Shangwan He wasn't a spiritual talisman master. Instead, he was a martial monarch whose cultivation was probably not lower than Chu Jiangwang's. As for the other party's attitude, Du Xiaofu couldn't help feeling suspicious when he was so courteous to someone he didn't know. It would be strange if there wasn't something behind this. Haha, little brother. You're so straightforward that I'm embarrassed. Shangwan He looked at Du Xiaofu with a flicker of emotion in his eyes. He then smiled and said, then I won't beat around the bush. The Celestial Treasure Pavilion does indeed have the Vajra black copper that little brother wants. In White Horse City, I'm afraid that other than the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, no other trading firm would have the Vajra black copper. Du Xiaofu's eyes moved as he looked at Shangwan He and said, how much is the Vajra black copper for? The Vajra black copper is not for sale. Please forgive me, little brother. Shangwan He shook his head to express his apology. Not for sale? Du Xiaofu was a little disappointed when he heard this. Recently, Du Xiaofu had been comprehending the secret weapon art left by his master, the weapon sovereign. He had gained some enlightenment and experience, so he decided to refine some special items. Along the way, Du Xiaofu had collected a lot of refining materials, but the most important Vajra black copper was still missing. Not for sale. Shangwan He shook his head and looked at Du Xiaofu. He said, but as long as little brother can win against the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, little brother, I have one condition. Celestial Treasure Pavilion can give little brother this Vajra black copper for free. Pavilion Master Shangwan, why don't you tell me the condition first? Du Xiaofu was curious about the Vajra black copper for free, but Du Xiaofu was still paying attention to that condition. Vajra black copper was not a rare item, but it should be worth a lot. It was easy to imagine the condition of giving it away for free. Shangwan He's eyes moved again, and he said to Du Xiaofu, little brother, do you know about the Myriad Weapon Convention? Myriad Weapon Convention? Du Xiaofu shook his head. He hadn't been in Spirit Realm for long, so he didn't know about this so-called Myriad Weapon Convention. Shangwan He was surprised to see Du Xiaofu shake his head. He then said, this Myriad Weapon Convention is a grand event in Spirit Realm, and even in the entire Central State, it is extremely famous. The Myriad Weapon Convention is only held once every 10 years. The next Myriad Weapon Convention will be held in 12 days. At that time, all artifact and symbol masters in Spirit Realm below the level of 6-star perfection will be able to participate. Every time the Myriad Weapon Convention is held, artifact and symbol masters from all over Central State will participate. The Myriad Weapon Convention is also held by Migres Hall. Migres Hall. When Du Xiaofu heard this, the 3 words Migres Hall caused his heart to tremble. Migres Hall. These 3 words had a special effect on Du Xiaofu. Migres Hall was created by his master, the Venerable Artifact, and his master was the Hall Master of Migres Hall. Looking at Du Xiaofu, Shangwan He continued, at the Myriad Weapon Convention, as long as you can enter the top 10 artifact and symbol masters, you can enter Migres Hall to study the artifact forging experiences left behind by the Venerable Artifact. If you are willing to join Migres Hall, you can become a guardian of Migres Hall. If you are unwilling, you can become a guest guardian of Migres Hall. His voice paused slightly, and then Shangwan He continued to say to Du Xiaofu, if you can become the champion of the Myriad Weapon Convention, you will not only receive the most profound artifact forging experiences left behind by the Venerable Artifact. If you are willing, you can become a guardian of Migres Hall if you join. If you are unwilling, you can become a guest guardian of Migres Hall and forever study the artifact forging experiences of the Venerable Artifact. The artifact forging experiences left behind by the Venerable Artifact. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu's lips curled into a slight smile. From Shangwan He's words, Du Xiaofu could roughly guess how famous his master, the Venerable Artifact, was back in the middle ground. Just the artifact forging experiences left behind by his master, the Venerable Artifact, were enough to cause countless of blacksmiths to chase after him. There were probably not many people in this world who could do that. Little brother, you should have heard of the venerable artifact, right? Shangguan he looked at Du Xiaofu and asked. Cough. Du Xiaofu coughed gently and said to Shangguan he without leaving a trace, I've heard of a little, but not much. Even though he said that, Du Xiaofu felt helpless in his heart. He had not only heard of the name of the venerable artifact, he was his first official master. The secret weapon manual and Saint Body manual that his master had spent his entire life studying were all in his mind right now. The venerable artifact was one of the top powerhouses whose name spread throughout the entire middle ground thousands of years ago. His artifact forging skills were superb, and with his identity as a blacksmith, the venerable artifact stood tall in the middle ground. Unfortunately, it was said that the venerable artifact's whereabouts were unknown. Some said that he had disappeared, while others said that he had fallen. Speaking of the venerable artifact, Shangguan He's eyes were filled with respect. At the end, he sighed slightly and said, however, the myriad weapon convention left behind by the venerable artifact has been passed down. The myriad weapon convention, which is held once every 10 years, is extremely popular every time. It is a grand event for all artifact and talisman masters, and also a grand event for the entire spirit realm. Du Xiaofu thought for a while, then looked at Shangguan He and asked with a smile, in that case, it seems that the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion can get some benefits, but in reality, almost all of their efforts will be in vain. Of course, to tell you the truth, the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion has existed for quite a long time. We've sent people to participate in several myriad weapon conventions. However, no one has been able to enter the top 10. Shangguan He smiled bitterly at Du Xiaofu and said, as far as I know, many forces in Spirit Realm are like this every time the Myriad Artifact Conference takes place. All of their efforts go to waste, but they still have to do it. His voice paused slightly, and Shangguan He took a deep breath and said to Du Xiaofu, this is a gamble. If we lose, the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion can still bear the responsibility. If we win, we can gain a lot. As for the result, it depends on luck. Du Xiaofu's eyes moved, and he was thinking in his mind. Little brother, have you thought about it? Shangguan He looked at Du Xiaofu and asked. Okay, I agree. However, I have to get the Vajra black copper first, because I need it in a few days. Du Xiaofu nodded and said to Shangguan He. Hearing this, Shangguan He's eyes moved slightly, and then he nodded and said, I believe in little brother. Then, please come to the Myriad Treasure Pavilion in 10 days. At that time, we have to go to the Great Weapon City to participate in the Myriad Weapon Convention. We need 2 days to leave in advance. Okay, Du Xiaofu replied and nodded slightly. I don't know little brother's name. You need to register for the Myriad Weapon Convention. At that time, the Myriad Treasure Pavilion will arrange everything for you. Shangguan He smiled and asked. Xiaofeng, Du Xiaofu said. After getting the Vajra black copper that he wanted, Du Xiaofu left the Myriad Treasure Pavilion. After Du Xiaofu left, in the VIP lounge of the Myriad Treasure Pavilion, shopkeeper Huang's eyes were filled with confusion. He asked Shangguan He, Pavilion Master, although the Vajra black copper is not a rare item, it is still very valuable. That Xiaofeng doesn't seem to be very old. If we give the Vajra black copper to him now, will he not be able to get it back? Moreover, at his age, I'm afraid that he won't be able to make it into the top 10. Hearing this, Shangguan He smiled mysteriously and said, I don't know what the result will be. I only know that the other people that we have found this time also don't have much hope. Anyway, we are still short of the 5 people that we originally wanted. It's not like we can't afford the Vajra black copper. Just treat it as a big gamble. At least, I can feel that this Xiaofeng is not simple. Pavilion Master, why do you say so? Shopkeeper Huang asked curiously. He did not notice how dazzling that mysterious young man was. Standing in front of me, he is still able to remain calm and collected. This is enough. Shangguan He stood with his hands behind his back. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile as he said, his eyes seemed to be filled with determination. How can a young man like him be simple? Mountains and forests stretched out endlessly, undulating up and down. This was an old forest deep in the mountains, and it was quite a distance away from Whitehorse City. The depths of the mountain range were usually uninhabited. Swoosh! In midair, a figure flashed through the air and stopped in the air above this mountain range. He looked at the continuous mountain range and the boundless sea of trees, sizing up and searching around with a slightly serious expression. This person was an old man who looked to be in his 60s. His body was extremely thin, like a skinny monkey. The robe on his body seemed extremely empty, and it fluttered with the wind. Where did you go? The old man's figure appeared and looked around. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Are you looking for me? At this moment, a faint voice was heard. In the forest not far away, a figure flew through the air from the crown of a towering tree. It was Du Xiaofu, who had left the Thousand Treasure Pavilion not long ago. Du Xiaofu looked at the old man in front of him. It was the soul symbol master who was staring at Little Star in the Thousand Treasure Pavilion. Since leaving the Thousand Treasure Pavilion, this person had been following him. However, that kind of tailing did not escape Du Xiaofu's prying eyes. Seeing Du Xiaofu appear, the old man was secretly surprised. Soon after, the old man's gaze was attracted by little Xingxing, who had peeked out from Du Xiaofu's clothes. A smile appeared in his eyes as he said to Du Xiaofu, "Young man, why don't we make a deal? You followed me so far just to make a deal with me?" Du Xiaofu smiled faintly and asked the old man. Of course. The old man nodded. He did not know why, but looking at the strange young man's smiling eyes, there was an involuntary uneasiness in his heart. However, this inexplicable uneasiness was immediately suppressed. The old man said to Du Xiaofu, "The little demonic beast in your arms should be a demonic beast variant. I like it very much. How about I give you a king-grade elixir in exchange?" Du Xiaofu looked at the old man, shook his head and said, "I don't want to make this deal. You can leave." "Young man, this deal is not bad. Don't regret it later. I don't have much patience." Hearing this, the old man's face darkened. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said again. The threat in his words was already indescribable. "I don't want to make a deal." Du Xiaofu still shook his head and said to the old man, "Don't tell me you want to force a deal? Forcing a deal is against the rules." "Young man, you are so naive. What's the point of forcing a deal? Since you don't want it, I have to do it myself." As the old man's voice fell, a 7-star mysterious talisman master's aura swept out, making people's minds and souls tremble. The old man's hand seals condensed, and the runes flashed, emitting a faint light. He wanted to suppress the young man in front of him as quickly as possible and then take the demonic beast variant. "Young man, leave this demonic beast variant to me," the old man shouted, and his figure instantly rushed towards Du Xiaofu. The 5 runes in his hand were like 5 lightning whips, respectively wrapping around Du Xiaofu's neck and limbs. Whoosh! The strange rune whips were strange and terrifying. They emitted a dazzling light that made people's souls tremble. "Robbery? You got the wrong person." Suddenly, at the same time, a loud shout came from Du Xiaofu's mouth. Du Xiaofu's eyes shone brightly as he unleashed his full power. He used his freakishly powerful physical body to sweep through space, ignoring the old man's mysterious 7-star talisman master attack. Mysterious Soul Eye. Undying Grass. Undying Grass. Divine Thunderstorm. With a malicious smile on his face, Du Xiaofu had long been prepared for this attack. Using the boundless profound energy within his body, he launched a series of attacks towards the mysterious 7-star spirit talisman master. 8 Night Watch. Because I was busy with some personal matters yesterday, I didn't prepare in advance. So, from 8 in the morning to 5 in the morning, I finished writing today. Xiaoyu will insist on it. But if he sleeps now, Xiaoyu will wake up in the afternoon. So, today's update should be in the evening. Brothers, don't wait for the update during the day. In addition, I am shamelessly asking for flowers and recommendation tickets. Thank you, brothers and sisters first. Chapter 807. Rumble. As the series of attacks descended, the defense of the old 7-star spirit talisman master was destroyed in an unstoppable manner. A mysterious 7-star talisman master had the same cultivation as a mysterious martial emperor. However, in terms of physical strength and attack power, A talisman master could not be compared to a martial cultivator under normal circumstances. Du Xiaofu had even killed Emperor Jiangchu. It was easy to imagine what would happen to the mysterious seven-star talisman master. The old man would never have thought that the mysterious youth in front of him was not his fat sheep, but a terrifying fiend. As blood gushed out of his mouth, the old man's body fell from the sky. He fell from the treetop and crashed into the towering trees before finally landing heavily on the ground. The old man fell to the ground, causing the ground to crack. His eyes were filled with shock and fear. The old man was a mysterious seven-star talisman master. He was quite famous in the entire Middle State. Who would have thought that he would be so weak in front of the youth? Originally, the old man wanted to rob Han Xin along the way. He wanted to finish the fight quickly and take the beast's energenic. He wanted to finish the fight quickly and leave quickly. He didn't want to be discovered. If word got out, it would be bad for his reputation. However, the old man would never have thought that the end result would be like this. Du Xiaofu's figure appeared without a sound just as the old man's body crashed to the ground. Several runed fingerprints fell and sealed the old man. Ayo, ayo! Little Xingxing poked its head out from Du Xiaofu's arms. Its golden eyes rolled around as it looked at the old man who was sealed by the restriction. It let out a low growl, obviously taking pleasure in the old man's misfortune. Old thief, you found the wrong person if you want to rob me. Du Xiaofu ruthlessly kicked the old man's butt. The heavy kick caused the old man to cry from the pain. However, under the seal, the old man's face turned red and he couldn't make a sound. After that, this old man could only look on helplessly as the mysterious youth rudely took away all three of his cosmos sacks. It could be said that he had tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. Du Xiaofu looked at the old man who was sealed by the restriction. His gaze was uncertain. After thinking for a while, he grabbed the old man's shoulder and left the mountain range with a few flashes. At dusk, in the huge and majestic mountain range, the air was filled with a blazing aura. The plants in the mountain range were different from those in other places. Ordinary plants would not be able to survive in the blazing heat. In the middle of the mountain range, there was a mountain peak. The surrounding peaks rose and fell, but the surroundings were completely covered by red rocks. This was a volcano. It was unknown when this volcano had erupted, but the creatures around the mountain had been burned to ashes by the terrifyingly high temperature of the lava. Chila, on the mountain peak, there was an arc-shaped cave entrance. Amidst the fluctuations of runes, several young figures flashed out. The figures had imposing appearances, and their bodies rippled with an aura that made one's soul overflow. The one in the lead was a young man who looked to be 22 or 23 years old. His skin was not fair, but there was a touch of handsomeness in his delicate facial features. His eyes flickered with an ethereal light. The Myriad Weapon Conference is about to begin, right? The ethereal youth stretched out his hand with a slight smile on his face. Looks like the champion of this Myriad Weapon Conference will be Senior Brother Tao. An extraordinary youth said to the ethereal youth, "There are no absolutes. Every time the Myriad Weapon Conference is held, there will be extraordinary talisman masters appearing. However, as disciples of the Migres Palace, our Migres Palace stands tall in the central continent by refining weapons. Naturally, we can't lose face for the Migres Palace in the Myriad Weapon Conference." The ethereal youth said with a faint smile. For the Myriad Weapon Conference, Senior Brother Tao has forcefully not broken through to the level of a 7-star talisman master. In addition to the refining skills of our Migres Palace, it's impossible for the people of the outside world to compare with us. In short, this Myriad Weapon Conference will be the same as the previous ones. The top 10 will belong to our Migres Palace. There was some arrogance in the eyes of a brocade-robed young man. In terms of refining skills, the Migres Palace naturally had the qualifications to be arrogant. There is always someone better than you. Our Migres Palace's weapon forging technique is naturally extraordinary. However, there is a limit to what we can comprehend from the Palace Master's weapon forging technique. In addition, the weapon forging technique left behind by the Palace Master is incomplete. The ethereal youth sighed softly and said, If we can obtain the Palace Master's complete secret soldier art and sacred body art, then in terms of refining skills, we will truly be able to stand tall in the central continent. Our Migres Palace will also be able to resound throughout the central continent once again. Senior Brother Tao, it's been so many years, but there has never been any news of the Palace Master. Could it be that the rumors are true? That our Palace Master has already? A young man was worried. There were many rumors outside. The ethereal young man interrupted the young man and said, "The Palace Lord's cultivation has long reached a level that we can't imagine. He definitely won't die like the rumors say." Moreover, the other 6 Palace Lords, although they never show themselves, it's rumored that they haven't died yet. They are all in closed-door training, trying to reach a level that we can't imagine. That's why the Palace Lord of the Migres Palace wouldn't die like the rumors say. He's most likely in closed-door training. I wonder when the Palace Master will return. A young man's eyes were filled with yearning when he heard this. He said softly, "It is rumored that the Palace Master's secret soldier art and sacred body art were so powerful that even those top demonic beasts would tremble in fear. If the Palace Master returns, our Migres Palace will not have to be suppressed by the other palaces all these years." At night, the continuous city was shrouded by the moonlight. The bustling noise was still quite noisy. In a quiet and secluded courtyard, a yellow-robed man stood quietly. His head was covered by a hood, only revealing a pair of deep eyes. Faintly, there seemed to be some lightning flashing in his eyes, which was particularly conspicuous under the night sky. Whoosh whoosh, several silhouettes appeared silently. They were all dressed in similar black clothes, like ghosts. Only their eyes were exposed outside the black hood of their robes, flashing with a sharp light. "What news have you brought?" the yellow-robed man asked as the black-robed men appeared. His voice was slightly old, as if it came from the mouth of an old man. "My lord, the higher-ups have confirmed that the 2 people from the Stone Dragon Empire are the ones we have been looking for. Now, we will start the second round of the plan." A black-robed man said respectfully to the yellow-robed man, "After so many years, we have finally found the right people." Hearing this, the yellow-robed man's eyes brightened, and a fierce aura fluctuated. He said, "The second round of the plan will start from the Migres Palace. The plan has been stagnant for so many years. It is time to make some progress." A black-robed man said, "My lord, it will be quite troublesome to enter the Migres Palace. If we reveal any flaws, it will be easy to alert the enemy." Boom! As the black-robed man's voice fell, a dazzling light suddenly spread out, and a frightening aura rippled in the surroundings. A bolt of lightning wreaked havoc and suddenly rushed towards the black-robed man who had just spoken. Bang! A low muffled sound was heard. In the blink of an eye, the black-robed man's body was destroyed by the lightning. The terrifying might of the lightning rippled in the surroundings. "My lord, please calm down." The remaining black-robed men trembled. Their eyes were filled with fear, and they immediately knelt on the ground. "Just do what I say. Don't act smart and alert the enemy. I know what to do." In a few days, it will be the Migres Palace's Myriad Weapon Conference. The top 10 will be able to enter the Migres Palace. At that time, it will be an opportunity. You can go to the Migres Palace to inquire about the situation and find a way to probe if the remaining old men have hidden information about Xiahou Fenglei. As soon as the yellow-robed man finished speaking, his figure flashed and he immediately disappeared into the sky. Under the night sky, in a deep valley in the mountains, there was a flickering light and a blazing aura reverberated in the surroundings. In the surroundings of the valley, runes were faintly discernible. On a huge rock, Du Xiaofu condensed hand seals. His whole body was enveloped in a white radiance. In front of him, a 5-colored spiritual stove and talisman cauldron were throbbing with blazing flames. His aura rippled out. Full attribute spiritual stove and talisman cauldron, dual cultivator of martial arts and talisman, at the peak of the 6th star of perfection as a talisman master and an equipment talisman master. His soul force is comparable to a mysterious 7th star talisman master. The aura on his body is extremely ancient. Not far away, an old man sealed in a restriction looked at Du Xiaofu. The shock in his heart was unable to calm down for a long time. He was unable to speak, but his gaze was filled with shock. Following Du Xiaofu's refinement, a black cloud appeared in the sky above the valley at some unknown time. It gradually covered the entire sky. Early in the morning, this part of the world was covered by black clouds. The light was also gloomy. The energy of the world fluctuated, and faint sounds of thunder resounded from the black clouds. A strange and astonishing aura that made one's soul palpitate rippled in this part of the world. At the peak of the sixth star of perfection, is this guy going to refine a Tao artifact? Sensing the changes in the energy of the world, the eyes of the sealed old man trembled. Deep shock surged in his eyes. I slept until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The first watch is here. Little Yu continues to write. Tell everyone to wait. Apologies. Apologies. Chapter 808. Under the elder's shocked gaze, the dark clouds in the sky gradually changed. They rippled like waves and finally condensed into a huge ball of dark clouds. Boom. When the ball of dark clouds condensed, the entire sky above the valley trembled inexplicably. There was a faint rumble of thunder and strange black runes spreading out. In a short time, a second dark cloud appeared in the sky. The terrifying aura was even more dense and majestic. Then, under the elder's dumbfounded gaze, a second huge ball of black light condensed. 2 stars of the lightning tribulation, mid-grade Tao artifact. Looking at the black balls of lightning in the sky, the elder's eyes trembled and ripples of shock appeared in his eyes. On the rocks in the valley, Du Xiaofu's spiritual stove talisman cauldron became more and more intense. It was as if one's heart would beat faster just by looking at it. Rumble. The lightning tribulation finally began. Dark clouds gathered and balls of lightning occupied the area. The low rumble of thunder resounded in the sky as if it was about to be destroyed. It made one's hair stand on end. The lightning swept down and the valley suddenly trembled violently. The first ball of lightning formed by the first ball of lightning directly bombarded the spiritual stove talisman cauldron in front of Du Xiaofu. Walala! Silver snakes filled the sky and shattered runes bloomed. Terrifying energy swept through the sky. Boom! In a short time, the space trembled again. The second ball of lightning surged almost at the same time. The terrifying might of lightning filled the sky. The second ball of lightning turned into a bolt of lightning and pierced through the sky. Then, it landed on the spiritual stove talisman cauldron in front of Du Xiaofu. Chi-la-la, the lightning struck and the silver snakes shuttled back and forth. The space exploded and overturned, causing people's eardrums to hurt and their minds to become dizzy. Bang, bang, bang. Destructive energy spread out in the surrounding valley. The mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. When the 2 bolts of lightning fell, the dark clouds in the sky dissipated. The terrifying suppressive aura gradually disappeared without a sound. Light returned to the valley once more. Within the valley, everything was destroyed. Dust filled the air. Several mountains in the surrounding area collapsed, and large cracks spread out into the distance. Oh. Under the old man's astonished gaze, he saw that in the valley where the mountains were crumbling and the earth was crumbling, the small demonic beast was actually covered in lightning. Its mouth seemed to have not had its fill yet, as if it had just swallowed the lightning from the thunder tribulation. The mysterious young man stood tall and straight, his body rippling with faintly visible lightning. When the lightning tribulation landed on the mysterious young man's body, it didn't seem to be affected at all, as if it wanted to continue. It was only now that the old man was able to clearly see that there were 3 needle-like objects in front of the mysterious young man as lightning circled around him. The needle-like object was covered in runes, and it rippled with the pressure of a mid-grade Tao artifact. If one didn't look carefully, it would be difficult to notice. Phew! Du Xiaofu withdrew his spiritual stove and talisman cauldron, and his aura became extremely weak. With a wave of his hand, 3 spiritual needles appeared in his palm. The spirit needle rippled with the might of a medial-grade Tao artifact. It seemed to have merged with space, making it difficult to detect. I've finally refined the soul-extinguishing spirit needle. Du Xiaofu's eyes revealed a smile. The reason he looked for the Vajra black copper was to refine the mid-grade Tao artifact, the soul-extinguishing spirit needle. The soul-extinguishing spirit needle was a Tao artifact recorded in the weapon sovereign's secret weapon technique. This Tao artifact was rather special. Cultivators couldn't fuse with it, and it belonged to spirit talisman masters. It specialized in suppressing the soul and could silently penetrate space. It had many changes and was extremely strange. According to the records in the secret weapon technique, the soul-extinguishing spirit needle was a surprise attack. Once it entered the body, it could easily destroy the opponent's spirit and soul, directly killing them. To Du Xiaofu, he was currently hiding his identity. Even Ba Ying and Depeng Golden Wings couldn't easily reveal themselves. Therefore, Du Xiaofu had long intended to refine one or two Tao artifacts that he could use. In the end, when he saw the soul-extinguishing spirit needle recorded in the secret weapon technique, he immediately had an idea. The soul-extinguishing spirit needle was unpredictable, and it was a surprise attack. Du Xiaofu placed great importance on it. Putting away the spirit needle in his hand, Du Xiaofu wasn't in a hurry to fuse with it. This wasn't a place to stay for long. Then, Du Xiaofu looked at little Xingxing, who had appeared before him at some point in time. Shock appeared in his eyes. Earlier, Du Xiaofu could clearly see that when the lightning tribulation descended, little Xingxing actually took the initiative to come out and devour the lightning. Under the power of the lightning tribulation, it was actually unable to injure little Xingxing. Instead, after devouring a few mouthfuls of lightning from the lightning tribulation, it was like eating snacks, still wanting more. Little Xingxing glanced at Du Xiaofu's gaze. Then, it went into Du Xiaofu's embrace. In its intimacy, it couldn't be bothered with Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu looked around. After putting away the talisman arrays, he stuffed a few medicinal pills into his mouth. Then, he lifted the old man on the ground and left. Swoosh, swoosh. After a while, many figures gradually appeared around the valley where Du Xiaofu had left. Many gazes swept over, and they were all rather puzzled. At dusk, the setting sun shrouded the mountain range. In the natural cave, Du Xiaofu's body was shrouded in white light like a divine light. There was an ancient aura rippling, and then it slowly converged. Phew! After exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Du Xiaofu opened his eyes. They flickered and slowly returned to being clear and deep. The aura on his body had recovered quite a bit. In the cave, the old man who was restrained looked at Du Xiaofu with shock in his eyes. In just one day, the young man in front of him was able to recover his aura. This recovery speed was quite abnormal. Feeling the changes in his body, Du Xiaofu's eyes were filled with satisfaction. Once he encountered an opportunity, he could break through at any time. It was the same for the cultivation of martial arts. As long as the opportunity came, he would be able to break through. However, this opportunity was not something that could be obtained at will. It could only be encountered and not sought. He could only let nature take its course. Forcefully breaking through was not necessarily a good thing. Now, we can have a good chat. Du Xiaofu walked in front of the old man who was sealed by the restriction and released a part of the restriction so that he could speak. What do you want to talk about? The old man asked. His face was still pale, and he was in a sorry state. He had been ravaged very badly. After these days, the old man definitely did not dare to treat the mysterious young man in front of him as a peer who was still wet behind the ears. There was only deep fear and shock in his eyes. Why did you snatch the demonic beast in my hand? Du Xiaofu sat on a rock in front of the old man and looked at him as he asked. The demonic beast in your hand seems to be an extraordinary demonic beast. I just wanted to exchange it with you, but you were not willing, the old man spoke with a look of grievance. If he had known that the young man in front of him was abnormal, he would not have dared to rob him halfway. He would have taken a detour. I did not want to trade with you, and you dare to rob me? Du Xiaofu glared at the old man. He was a little unhappy. He stretched out his leg and kicked the old man's butt. Ah, the old man cried out in pain. He looked at Du Xiaofu with a face of grievance and said, Kid, I am a person of status. You have to show me some respect. You have status, yet you dare to rob me. You want me to show you respect? Du Xiaofu did not hesitate to kick him again. Kid, I was wrong. Please let me go. The old man begged for mercy. He felt so wrong that tears were about to fall from his old face. Why should I let you go? Du Xiaofu rolled his eyes at the old man and said indifferently, if you want to die now, then don't try anything funny. The seal I set up isn't something you can break easily. However, you've been trying to break it for so long, so you should be able to break it soon. Hearing this, the old man's gaze suddenly trembled. He looked at Du Xiaofu with deep meaning. He had indeed been secretly trying to break the restriction seal. However, the restriction seal was extremely strange. After trying for so long, he still had a long way to go. The old man thought that he had done it secretly. However, he did not expect that everything had been noticed by the mysterious young man. Du Xiaofu did not pay attention to the old man. He took out the old man's 3 chinquin bags and began to break the restriction. Du Xiaofu estimated that a 7-star mysterious talisman master status was definitely not low. This made Du Xiaofu feel a little anticipation. One had to know that Chu Jiangwang's wealth was not small. Du Xiaofu felt that the old man's wealth should not be below Chu Jiangwang's. After all, everyone knew that talisman masters were generally relatively wealthy. Kid, my chinquin bags are not easy to open. Let's make a deal. If you let me go, I will give you the items in my 3 chinquin bags. How about it? The old man looked at Du Xiaofu and took the initiative to speak. At this time, saving his life was the most important thing. You do have some skills. Your spiritual soul power is also not bad. Du Xiaofu sighed and tried to break the restriction runes on the old man's 3 chinquin bags. He found that the old man had some skills. His spiritual soul power was also not bad. His chinquin bags were not easy to break. However, Du Xiaofu did not give up and continued to break. Then, in less than 3 hours, the old man's 3 chinquin bags were broken by Du Xiaofu. Who? The old man sucked in a breath of cold air. He was a 7-star talisman master and was somewhat famous in the central province. The restriction seal on his chinquin bags was not easy to break. Even a talisman master with a higher cultivation level than him might not be able to break it. But now, the young man in front of him had opened his 3 chinquin bags in less than 3 hours. As a 7-star mysterious talisman master, the old man naturally knew that the mysterious young man in front of him had reached a terrifying level of comprehension in talisman master. The most terrifying thing was that the mysterious young man was only a 6-star complete talisman master. Chapter 809. Du Xiaofu checked the 3 chinquin bags, and his gaze became very embarrassed. He originally wanted to look at all 3 of them together. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have needed to spend so much effort to open the second one after opening one. Du Xiaofu checked the 3 chinquin bags and found that they were empty except for a few king-grade elixirs and some miscellaneous items. There wasn't even a decent spiritual herb or royal-grade elixir. Du Xiaofu finally understood why the old man was willing to trade the 3 chinquin bags for him to leave. There was nothing valuable in the 3 chinquin bags. Looking at Du Xiaofu's expression, the old man seemed to be a little embarrassed. His face alternated between green and red as he awkwardly said, "Actually, I originally had a lot of valuable things on me, but something happened recently, so I'm empty. You're wasting my energy." Du Xiaofu glanced at the old man helplessly and said, "You tell me yourself, should I kill you or destroy your cultivation as punishment?" Hearing this, the old man's eyes trembled and he said, "Young man, you don't have to be so ruthless. You didn't lose anything. Don't be so ruthless." Du Xiaofu said, "I'll take care of you today and let you go. When we meet again in the future, if there's a chance, it'll be strange if you don't bite me. If people don't touch me, I won't touch them. If people touch me, I'll kill them all." The old man's eyes trembled and his expression turned serious. He looked at the young man in front of him. He naturally wouldn't doubt the young man's words. Such a fiend would definitely not be merciful. "Consider me unlucky. If you want to kill me, then kill me. Today, I'm destined to die in front of you. Do it. However, when the time comes, please cover my bones with some soil. I only hope that there's a place for me to be buried." The old man stared at Du Xiaofu for a moment before closing his eyes. Du Xiaofu's eyes moved. This old man still had some backbone. He frowned and said, "I'll give you a way out. Do you want it?" "What means of survival?" When Bailey Su heard this, he immediately opened his eyes. Although he dared to die, it did not mean that he did not want to live. Being able to continue living was definitely better than dying. Follow me for 10 years as my slave. This is the path to survival. Otherwise, you will die. Think about it. Du Xiaofu said with a serious expression. Du Xiaofu didn't really want to kill a 7-star mysterious talisman master. However, if this person did not make him feel at ease, Du Xiaofu would not be merciful, lest he bring trouble to himself in the future. Bailey Su's eyes trembled. As a 7-star talisman master, it was hard for him to accept being a slave for 10 years. If it were any other 7-star talisman master, it would be absolutely hard for them to accept. All right, I agree. 10 years it is. This time, I admit defeat. Bailey Su clenched his teeth and replied. He knew that he had no other choice. This time, he had fallen into his grandmother's house. Du Xiaofu undid Bailey Su's seal. With his own strength, he was not afraid of Bailey Su doing anything in the open. However, he still had to be on guard against him in the dark. Du Xiaofu handed a goo poison pill to Bailey Su. He said, I will not be at ease with you for the time being. This is a goo poison pill. You will need the antidote within a year. Take it first. Bailey Su looked at Du Xiaofu for a while. His eyes twitched. This mysterious young man in front of him was more difficult to deal with than he thought. He helplessly took the goo poison pill from Du Xiaofu's hand and swallowed it. Don't worry. As a slave, I will not make things difficult for you. However, if you want to do something, you have to think carefully about whether you have the strength to do anything to me. Du Xiaofu faintly smiled at Bailey Su, but the warning in his eyes was not expressed in words. He said, in the future, just call me Third Young Master. Try to hide your aura outside. Bailey Su nodded. Looking at the young man in front of him, he was puzzled. Was this really just a young man? The next morning, outside White Horse City, looking at the magnificent city gates, Bailey Su asked Du Xiaofu, Third Young Master, why are we still in White Horse City? I heard that there is a myriad weapon convention. Do you know about it? Asked Du Xiaofu. Of course I know about the myriad weapon convention. All talisman masters at the peak of 6-star and below can participate. As Bailey Su spoke, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Du Xiaofu with some astonishment. He said, You are not going to participate in the myriad weapon convention, are you? Is there a problem with the myriad treasure pavilion using Vajra black copper to make me participate? Du Xiaofu glanced at Bailey Su and asked. Huff. After Bailey Su took a deep breath, he looked at Du Xiaofu helplessly. In his heart, he knew very well that although the young man in front of him was only a peak 6-star talisman master, he was a terrifying master who could refine a mid-grade Dao artifact with just a wave of his hand. If this guy were to participate in the Myriad Weapon Convention, it would not be called the Myriad Weapon Convention. It would simply be a blow to the other talisman masters. At that time, there would probably be many talisman masters who would be so shocked that they would commit suicide. Just let the other talisman masters live. Why would a talisman master make things difficult for a talisman master? Bailey Su glanced at Du Xiaofu and muttered. In his heart, he could only pray for the other talisman masters at this Myriad Weapon Convention. White Horse City, Myriad Treasure Pavilion. In the VIP room, there were several people sitting upright. The one sitting at the head was Shangguan He. On his left sat a young man of about 28 or 29 years old, and two middle-aged men in their 40s. In addition, there was an old man who looked to be in his 50s. He was dressed in a long robe and his eyes were slightly sharp. Although the aura of the four people was restrained, it was not difficult to see that they were all talisman masters. Their cultivation level was also at the 6-star talisman master level. Everyone, please wait a moment. We still have a little brother Xiao Feng who hasn't arrived yet. Looking at the time, he should be here soon. Shangguan He smiled slightly and said to the four people in the room with great courtesy, Let everyone wait for him alone. I don't know how good his refining skills are, but it's quite rude. The old man in his 50s moved slightly, and there was some displeasure in his eyes. However, in front of Shangguan He did not show it. When Shangguan He heard this, there was a slight fluctuation in his eyes. He smiled slightly and said, Talisman Master, please take a seat. That little brother Xiaofeng should be here soon. Seeing that Shangguan he had spoken, the old man in his 50s could not say anything more. He's just the last to arrive. Although he has made everyone wait for a long time, it's not rude. At this moment, a voice came from outside the VIP room. Then, two figures stepped in. It was Du Xiaofu and Bailey Su. Outside the VIP room, Du Xiaofu happened to hear those words, which caused some fluctuation in his eyes. In the VIP room, everyone raised their heads and looked at Du Xiaofu and Bailey Su. The old man who was called the Talisman Master by Shangguan, he also looked to the side and swept his gaze across young Master Du and Bailey Su. The old man let out a low snort, but he didn't say anything else. Instead, he maintained an air of self-restraint. Little brother Xiaofeng has arrived. Shangguan he stood up. With his cultivation and strength, his attitude was extremely respectful. After that, his gaze, intentionally or unintentionally, glanced at Bailey Su. I promised Pavilion Master Shangguan, so I will naturally arrive. Du Xiaofu nodded. He had a good impression of Shangguan he. When others respected him, he would return the favor tenfold. Du Xiaofu had such a character. Therefore, he was also very polite to Shangguan he. If little brother thinks highly of me, just call me elder brother. There's no need to treat me as an outsider. Shangguan he said, now that little brother has arrived, let's set off. We will need some time to reach Great Weapon City. It's always better to set off early. Brother Shangguan, it should be fine if I bring a servant with me, right? Du Xiaofu nodded and asked. Servant. Shangguan he and the several people in the VIP room were surprised. Then, Shangguan he nodded and said, of course there's no problem. Chapter 8:10. The other three talisman masters looked at Lu Zhenghan with admiration in their eyes. After all, being able to rank in the top 300 in the Myriad Weapon Convention 10 years ago was indeed not bad. Now that 10 years had passed, Lu Zhenghan had already reached the peak of the complete 6-star realm. It was rumored that he had already forged a half-step Dao weapon. Therefore, this time, he really had a chance to enter the top 10, and the chances were very high. According to the previous Myriad Weapon Convention, those who entered the top 10 were all able to forge half-step Dao weapons. If he was lucky, Lu Zhenghan would indeed have a good chance of entering the top 10. The other three talisman masters then asked Lu Zhenghan about some things to pay attention to in the Myriad Weapon Convention. This made Lu Zhenghan even more arrogant and superior. He glanced at Du Xiaofu with some disdain. Bailey Su couldn't bear to listen anymore. His face changed color. This was simply torture. With Bailey Su's temper, if it wasn't for Du Xiaofu secretly hinting at him to stop him, he probably wouldn't have been able to resist smacking that guy to death. The most difficult ones to deal with are the disciples of the Migres Palace. They are all outstanding in forging. Although they are young, they are all extraordinary. However, as long as they perform well, it's not like they don't have a chance. Lu Zhenghan and the other three talisman masters chatted nonstop. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly and didn't mind. Lu Zhenghan wasn't young, but being able to forge a half-step Dao weapon at the peak of the complete 6-star realm was considered pretty good regardless of whether it was a coincidence or luck. He did have some capital. In the ancient Sky Sect, Gu Zong was only able to forge a half-step Dao weapon at the peak of the complete 6-star realm. However, Gu Zongyi had not reached the peak of the complete 6-star realm. Compared to Lu Zhenghan, he was much younger. Moreover, he had already been able to refine a pseudo-Dao treasure more than a year ago. His talent was obvious. Shangguan he didn't speak much, only occasionally flattering Lu Zhenghan. His gaze was mostly secretly sizing up Du Xiaofu. What are you trying to act like? If you're really a dish, you wouldn't have been eliminated the first 2 times. Bailey Su couldn't take it anymore as he listened to Lu Zhenghan's incessant chatter. What do you mean? Hearing this, Lu Zhenghan's face immediately turned red. This was clearly a slap to his face. Lu Zhenghan stared intently at Bailey Su and said in a low voice, if you don't explain yourself today, don't blame me for being impolite. I'd like to see how you're going to be rude to me. Bailey Su was stunned when he heard this. Then, a faint smile appeared on his face. He really didn't care about a peak-complete 6-star weapon symbol master. Before he fell, many martial emperor realm cultivators, including those at the peak of the complete martial emperor realm, had to bow in front of him. Forget it, we're all going to participate in the Myriad Weapon Conference. Don't make things difficult for Pavilion Master Shangguan. Du Xiaofu said helplessly. Forget it, it's easy for you to say. A servant dares to be so impudent. Indeed, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Birds of a feather flock together. Lu Zhenghan said coldly. With his status, how could he let things go so easily? The instant Lu Zhenghan's words left his mouth, Du Xiaofu's gaze abruptly landed on him. He stared directly into Lu Zhenghan's eyes and said indifferently, I said to let my people forget about it. If you say another word, I won't be responsible for what my people will do. Don't blame me for not warning you. Looking at the pair of deep eyes under the purple mask, Lu Zhenghan didn't know why, but he suddenly shivered. It was as if a chill had suddenly spread throughout his body. Weapon King, little brother Qiaofeng, how about giving me some face? It's fate that we're able to participate in the Myriad Weapon Conference together. I still have to rely on you guys during the Myriad Weapon Conference. Shangguan, he said politely as he looked at Du Xiaofu and Lu Zhenghan. Lu Zhenghan swept his long sleeves and stared fiercely at Du Xiaofu. He then said to Shangguan, I'll give face to Pavilion Master Shangguan. Some people will only realize their ignorance during the Myriad Weapon Conference. After saying that, Lu Zhenghan didn't say anything else and closed his eyes. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly and helplessly at Shangguan. He then closed his eyes to rest. On the other hand, Bailey Su was a little disappointed. He originally thought that he could find an excuse to make a move, but he couldn't do anything now. The other three talisman masters looked at Du Xiaofu and Lu Zhenghan. They didn't say anything else and closed their eyes to rest. After this episode, the flying demonic beast became much quieter. Only the sound of flapping wings could be heard as the group headed towards the Great Weapon City. The Great Weapon City was definitely one of the most famous cities in the Central Plains. Not only was it the most popular trading center for Dao weapons, talisman weapons, spiritual weapons, and various refining materials in the Central Plains. Many businesses and forces from other places in the Central Plains would come to the Great Weapon City to trade. In addition, every Myriad Weapon Conference was held in the Great Weapon City. This also led to the Great Weapon City's special status. As the Myriad Weapon Conference approached, talisman masters, who were rarely seen in the vast Great Weapon City, could be seen frequently. Recently, there were countless experts in the Great Weapon City. In a short period of time, experts gathered and various forces came. There were all kinds of people, and it was very lively. When Du Xiaofu and Shangguan arrived at the Great Weapon City, it was already nighttime on the second day. The vast city stretched as far as the eye could see. It was extremely eye-catching, like a monstrous giant beast. Swoosh, swoosh. Outside the Great Weapon City, flying demonic beasts came from time to time. Many talisman masters were rushing to the Great Weapon City. Every time the Myriad Weapon Conference is held, all the inns in the Great Weapon City will be full. Fortunately, our Myriad Treasure Pavilion has some businesses in the Great Weapon City. One of them is an inn. Everyone can have a good rest tonight. Tomorrow is the day of the Myriad Weapon Conference. Shangguan said to everyone in an inn. After passing through a rather noisy area, they arrived at a quiet courtyard and guest room. Du Xiaofu and Bailey Su were arranged to stay in a courtyard. After looking around, Bailey Su casually set up a seal. Third young master, there are many experts in the Great Weapon City recently. Bailey Su said to Du Xiaofu. Using his spiritual soul power, he found that there were many experts in the city now. Protect me. I have to prepare for tomorrow's Myriad Weapon Conference. Du Xiaofu said to Bailey Su. Hearing this, Bailey Su couldn't help but glare at Du Xiaofu. The terrifying master in front of him was going to participate in the Myriad Weapon Conference, and he had to make preparations first. This was simply not letting other talisman masters live. At night, the bright moon hung in the sky. In the Great Weapon City, there was a lively noise coming from time to time. In the courtyard, Shangguan looked at the night sky. The night wind blew gently, causing his clothes to flutter. Pavilion Master, do you think there is any hope among the 5 people this time? An old man came to Shangguan side. He was a martial king realm cultivator who had accompanied Shangguan He from White Horse City to Great Weapon City. The one with the most hope should be Lu Zhenghan. If he can perform normally this time, there is indeed a great chance. In order to invite him, we have paid a great price. However, this person is arrogant and cunning. He is only interested in profit. Even if he really enters the top 10, I'm afraid it might not be a good thing for us. Shangguan He looked at the night sky and his eyes narrowed. He then said softly, but this time, I can't see through Xiaofeng. That Xiaofeng seems to be somewhat mysterious. Hearing this, the martial king realm cultivator nodded slightly. Shangguan He smiled and said, he's more than mysterious. If I'm not wrong, the servant following behind him is at least a talisman master of the mysterious 7 stars. This kind of person is more than mysterious. The next morning, after dawn, Great Weapon City slowly woke up. Today was a grand event in Great Weapon City and one of the biggest events in the entire spirit domain. The Myriad Weapon Conference, which was held once every 10 years, would begin today. As the darkness before dawn passed, many figures appeared on the streets of Great Weapon City, which already had a trace of ancient aura. Some people were rushing to the square of Great Weapon City to watch the Myriad Weapon Conference. There were also obvious talisman masters among them. These talisman masters, as spirit talisman masters, had a noble status. There were very few of them, and it was rare to see them. Therefore, they appeared more mysterious and respectable. But today, there were talisman masters everywhere on the streets of Great Weapon City. All the talisman masters' destination was the same. They were heading to the largest square in the center of Great Weapon City. That was the place where the Myriad Weapon Conference would be held today. Early in the morning, the white divine light around Du Xiaofu's body slowly retracted. He spat out a mouthful of turbid air and opened his eyes. The light fluctuated and then returned to being clear and deep. Today was the day of the Myriad Weapon Conference. Du Xiaofu's eyes faintly pondered. At this moment, he was extremely moved. The Myriad Weapon Conference was held by the Migres Palace, and his master, the revered artifact, was the palace master of the Migres Palace. But now, more than 1,000 years had passed, and he did not know the current situation of the Migres Palace. His master's physical body might still be in the Alioth Palace. No matter what, I'll think of a way to enter the Migres Palace first. Du Xiaofu muttered softly. Then, he stood up and took a deep breath before walking out of the room. Bailey Su's words clearly felt like a slap to his face. His tone and words were as if he was looking down on a 6-star symbol master. Mr. Zuz, Shangguan He, who was in the middle, could only smile and say awkwardly. Although, Bailey to Bailey Yu, Zhenghan Su, SNNZS. Bailey Su did not pay much attention to Lu Zhenghan's gaze. He knew very well that it would not be long before Lu Zhenghan cried. However, what puzzled Bailey Su was the fact that he could not understand why the Terror Lord would be interested in participating in the Myriad Weapons Convention. He was simply going to bully others. On the street, Du Xiaofu followed the crowd to the plaza. Along the way, he heard the clamor and saw many weapon symbol masters. His heart could not help but ripple. This was the Myriad Weapon Conference, organized by the Migres Hall under his master weapon sovereign. It was also a weapon refining competition. If he was unable to obtain a ranking, it would be a disgrace to his master weapon sovereign. However, Du Xiaofu was in a difficult position. If he used the secret weapon art, it would be too obvious. Would his identity be easily exposed? If his relationship with his master weapon sovereign was exposed, it would be rather inconvenient. As they flew through the air, the surroundings were densely packed with figures. Finally, a huge square appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The vastness of the square caused Du Xiaofu to raise his eyebrows and look at it. The vast plaza was so vast that one could not see the end of it. The surrounding crowd was even more spectacular. One could only see a dense mass of heads. The number of spectators was innumerable. On the plaza, there were many scattered stone platforms. The figures of weapon symbol masters shuttled back and forth. They seemed to be looking for their own refining positions, according to the number on their jade slips. The 5 of you, the entrance is in front. All the procedures have been completed. You may enter. I will cheer for the 5 of you from the seats below. I hope that everyone can achieve good results." The crowd was so dense that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Fortunately, there was a special passage at the entrance of the weapon symbol master. "Shangguan," he said after leading the 5 to the entrance. The 5 of them nodded. Beside the entrance, there was a person with an extraordinary aura. He was wearing armor and checking the jade slips. After that, he would remind the weapon symbol master of the precautions before entering the plaza. Huff! When Du Xiaofu stepped onto the vast plaza, he could not help but take in a deep breath. The densely packed figures were all weapon symbol masters. There were probably close to 10,000 of them. There were also many weapon symbol masters queuing up to enter the plaza. On the plaza, there was a stone platform about 10 feet wide. There was a number on the stone platform. The weapon symbol masters would enter their refining positions according to the number on their jade slips. There were several seats on the highest platform in the plaza. They seemed to be the final seats for the judges. Around the arc-shaped square, at the edge of the square, there were many seats in the front row that were closest to the refining area. One look was enough to tell that these seats were prepared for the various factions and experts. Not just any spectator could sit there. Humph! Lu Zhenghan coldly snorted as he shot a glance at Du Xiaofu. Then, he walked towards the plaza in search of his refining seat with ease. Du Xiaofu ignored Lu Zhenghan and smiled faintly. At this moment, there were already several weapon symbol masters standing behind their refining positions in the plaza, waiting for the 1,000-weapon convention to begin. Du Xiaofu looked at the number on his registration jade slip and found his refining position. Du Xiaofu's refining position was located in the center of the plaza. It was an inconspicuous position. Looking around, Du Xiaofu did not see Lu Zhenghan and the other 3. Their refining positions did not seem to be nearby. As time passed, more and more weapon symbol masters flooded in from the entrance. There were also a few female weapon symbol masters amongst them, looking valiant and formidable. All of the weapon symbol masters were searching for their refining positions according to their own numbers. With the spectator stands at the top, the black mass of figures was already densely packed together as many screams of worship rang out. In addition, the densely packed weapon symbol masters around him were mostly 6-star weapon symbol masters. This made Du Xiaofu's heart burn with a trace of passion. Du Xiaofu was after all a young man. In this kind of situation, he could not help but feel a little impatient. He wanted to compete with the weapon symbol masters of the entire spirit realm and the central continent. After a while, the VIP seats in the front row began to fill up. Inside and outside the plaza, there was a sea of people. Shouts and clamor converged into a flood that rushed into the clouds. Suddenly, a commotion came from the front of the crowd. Du Xiaofu looked in the direction of the commotion and saw that there were hundreds of figures entering the weapon symbol master entrance. Hundreds of people, both men and women. They were all young, the youngest not even 20 years old. But every one of them had an extraordinary temperament and a hint of arrogance in their eyes. At the front was a handsome young man with an ethereal gaze. Many young girls in the crowd cheered and shouted. When these young men and women entered, they neatly entered the front row of refining positions. These young men and women all stood in the front row of refining positions. They were the most eye-catching and the most attention-grabbing. From the heated discussion around him, Du Xiaofu learned that these young men and women were all disciples of Migre's palace. Migre's palace represented the highest palace of weapon symbol masters in spirit realm. The disciples who walked out of the Migre's palace all had extraordinary attainments in artifact forging. As the disciples of Migre's palace came, the crowd behind them became restless again. Many figures once again slowly entered the stage under the escort. Chapter 8:12. At the entrance of the plaza, there were quite a number of old and burly men walking forward. Behind them, there were quite a number of figures respectfully crowding around them. The surrounding onlookers also slowly calmed down. As these figures walked forward, the faintly discernible auras on their bodies rippled, seemingly causing the entire great weapon city to ripple for no reason. It's the elders and protectors of the Migres Hall. There should be elders from the other halls of the 7-star hall as well. According to the rules of previous editions, Some elders from the other halls will be arranged to act as judges during the Thousand-Weapon Conference. It is said that some important figures outside the Seven-Star Hall will also be invited to act as judges in order to show that the Thousand-Weapon Conference is fair and open. Those are all top-notch experts. There were still some whispers in the surroundings. Their gazes were all filled with respect and yearning as they watched the figures slowly walk up to the highest platform in the plaza. Du Xiaofu raised his head. His gaze was also sizing up the figures that had arrived. Looking from afar, the auras of the figures were restrained. However, compared to the auras of the elders of the ancient sky sect, they were definitely not much weaker. The old man in the middle looked to be around 70 years old. His face was filled with wrinkles, and he wore a somewhat loose, plain-colored robe that did not fit him. He looked as though he had one foot in the grave, but his seat was the most central position on the high platform. His eyes were constantly smiling. As this old man sat down, quite a number of old and burly men around him also sat down. There were also quite a number of people standing behind him. Their gazes swept across the 10,000 weapon symbol masters in the plaza. As this group of people sat down, the curtains of the Thousand-Weapon Conference finally opened under the gazes of tens of thousands of people. Clang! A clear sound of a bell reverberated both inside and outside the plaza. It resounded throughout Great Weapon City, causing the surrounding whispers to suddenly become quiet. Swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, countless gazes both inside and outside the plaza landed on the high platform in the plaza. They watched as the 70-year-old man, who seemed to have one foot in the grave, slowly stood up. Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, the old man in his 70s, who looked like he was about to die, trembled as he stood up. He slowly walked to the front of the referee's seat on the high platform, and his gaze swept across the over 10,000 weapon symbol masters in the plaza. Everyone, first of all, I would like to thank everyone for coming to participate in the Myriad Weapons Conference that has been held by the Migres Palace for 1,530 years. Let me introduce myself first. This old man is Zhu Xiu of the Migres Palace. The old man's voice was old and calm. However, at this moment, it clearly reverberated in the ears of everyone inside and outside the square. At this moment, both inside and outside the square, including the tens of thousands of weapon symbol masters on the square, were all looking at Zhu Xiu with gazes filled with reverence. That's Elder Zhu Xiu from the Migres Palace. It's rumored that Elder Zhu Xiu's attainments in refining weapons have already reached an extraordinary level. Elder Zhu Xiu's name has shaken the Central Plains. His attainments in craftsmanship are enough to rank him in the top 10. Shocked whispers spread out as countless gazes looked at Elder Zhu Xiu in awe. That old man, who seemed to be on the verge of death, had an extremely high reputation among the current weapon symbol masters. His extraordinary attainments in craftsmanship had allowed him to rank in the top 10 of the current weapon symbol masters. Myriad Weapons Conference, 1,530 years. Du Xiaofu muttered softly. At this moment, when he heard such a number, he could not help but feel proud for his master, the weapon sovereign. Elder Zhu Xiu's gaze swept across the surroundings. His gaze still carried a light smile as he said, "The Myriad Weapons Conference will be ranked by the highest level of craftsmanship. The judges will jointly judge. Those who cheat will have their cultivation crippled at the very least, or be killed at the very least. In the end, the top 10 will be able to become a protector of my Migres Palace. The champion will be able to become an elder and will be able to comprehend the refining experience of my Migres Palace's master, the weapon sovereign." Boom! As Elder Zhu Xiu's words fell, the surroundings boiled, and many gazes immediately surged with passion. Entering the Migres Palace to become a protector elder and become famous in the world, to be able to obtain the refining experience of the weapon sovereign was an irresistible temptation for all weapon symbol masters. Next, let me introduce the other four main judges this time. First, Merak Palace's Elder Yun Ziqin, Tianji Palace's Elder In Xuanlong, Aliath Palace's Elder Ko Jixiang, and the last one is Weapon Addict Guang Hongxing. As Elder Zhu Xiu's voice fell, a beautiful woman in her 40s, a slender, middle-aged man with an extraordinary temperament, a burly old man in his 50s, and an old man who looked as old as Elder Zhu Xiu stood up and nodded to the surroundings before returning to his seat. Looking at the figures, the surroundings were bustling with excitement and reverence. Their names resounded in all directions, and each of them was a top expert. The people from Alioth Palace are also here. Du Xiaofu secretly raised his eyebrows. At this moment, a voice came from the top again. Now, on behalf of the judges and the Migres Palace, I announce that the Myriad Weapons Conference will now begin. Du Xiaofu planned to smoothly enter the top 10. As long as he didn't lose his master's face, it would be fine. Du Xiaofu's deliberate concealment was truly extremely concealed. Without leaving any traces, he didn't attract any attention from others. The Myriad Weapon meeting was taking place, so the spectators weren't in a hurry. The Myriad Weapon meeting wasn't something that could be completed in a single day. In the previous Myriad Weapon meetings, it wasn't strange for a Dao artifact to appear. With the cultivation level of a 6-star symbol master, it would take at least 10 days to refine an initial rank Dao tool. Following the start of the Myriad Weapon meeting, the entire venue was placed under martial law. The auras of many powerhouses spread in the surroundings. No one was allowed to affect the Myriad Weapon meeting, or they would be mercilessly suppressed. Moreover, with the peak powerhouses seated in the judges' seats, there weren't many people who dared to cause trouble in Great Weapon City. Bang, bang, bang. Just 2 hours after the Myriad Weapon meeting began, a few explosions began to ring out. A few spiritual stoves and talisman cauldrons exploded. Some talisman masters with low cultivations became overly nervous and directly exploded their cauldrons. A few nervous talisman masters in the surroundings were affected by the explosions, and quite a few of them declared their failure. To these failed talisman masters, some of them retreated in dejection with flushed faces. Some of them cursed at the people beside them for affecting them, but they could only obediently choose to leave. Du Xiaofu completely blocked off the surrounding movements and began to immerse himself in his refinement. As Du Xiaofu's performance was extremely low-key, he didn't attract anyone's attention. At the front row of the plaza, Bailey Su was currently following Shangguan He and was fortunate enough to have a seat. It was Shangguan He who personally invited Bailey Su to sit. What's that guy doing? Bailey Su's gaze had always been locked onto Du Xiaofu through the crowd. Seeing Du Xiaofu withdraw his spiritual stoves and talisman cauldrons, as well as his aura, it was clear that he planned to hide until the end. Since he wanted to hide, why bother participating in the Myriad Weapon meeting? This made Bailey Su feel extremely strange. Shangguan He gazed at the plaza, and it could be seen that he was rather nervous. In the front row of the plaza, the young disciples of the Migres Hall closest to the judges' seats were all young, but there wasn't the slightest bit of panic in their movements. All of the refinement seemed to be under their control, which made people secretly look at them in a new light. As expected of a disciple of the Migres Hall, I only finished today's update at 3:30 in the morning again. Apologies everyone, please forgive me. Sorry. Chapter 8:13. Time slowly passed. Blazing flames soared into the sky from the cauldrons in the plaza, making the surroundings of the plaza as hot as a furnace. The spectators with lower cultivations found it hard to resist the heat that could affect the soul. And in this kind of refining, there were constantly artifact symbol masters who were unable to bear the pressure, causing their cauldrons to explode and fail. In the blink of an eye, it was the 5th day. The number of failures had already reached more than half. There were also a few artifact symbol masters who succeeded in refining spiritual artifacts. However, the success of these artifact symbol masters only depended on their participation. Their cultivations were all at the level of 4 or 5-star artifact symbol masters. They participated in the Myriad Weapon Conference purely to train themselves. As for obtaining a ranking, they didn't dare think too much about it. Bang! Not far from Du Xiaofu's refining position, there was a 5-star artifact symbol master at the peak of the 5th star. For some reason, the temperature inside his cauldron rose higher and higher. Flames surged and finally, his cauldron exploded. Following the explosion of this cauldron, many artifact symbol masters in the surroundings were affected. The artifact symbol masters in their cauldrons also failed. Du Xiaofu didn't move or shake, blocking all movements in the surroundings. The spectators in the surroundings had been observing for several days and nights. Some closed their eyes to rest, waiting for the most exciting final showdown. Everyone knew that the true showdown in the Myriad Weapon Conference would only begin after the 10th day. Even if there were artifact symbol masters who succeeded in refining spiritual artifacts and artifact symbols, they were only there to serve as a foil. The true peak showdown would be at the end. After the 8th day, there were less than 1,000 artifact symbol masters left out of the 10,000. However, the artifact symbol masters who could still remain in the plaza were all of high cultivation. Walala! Energy rippled and aura swept out. Artifact symbols appeared continuously, causing the spectators to whisper to each other. There were also artifact symbol masters who failed in refining their artifact symbols at the last moment, leaving with a disappointed and dispirited expression. There are only 2 people left. In the spectator seats, behind Shangguan He, a martial king elder had a gloomy and dignified expression. This time, there was no one else in the heavenly treasure pavilion. In these 8 days, the 2 of them only managed to forge practitioner weapons. One of them failed in the end and left regretfully. Only the 2 of them remained. Shangguan He did not speak. His eyes were fixed on the field. Only Bailey Su was the most relaxed. His face was leisurely and contented as he watched the many weapon and symbol masters compete with each other. His gaze occasionally swept across the judges' seats. On the 9th day, there were less than 100 tool symbol masters left in the field, and the auras inside each and every one of their spiritual stoves and symbol cauldrons were the most vigorous. Boom! When a high-grade practitioner weapon appeared, its aura attracted everyone's attention. On the evening of the 9th day, dark clouds began to gather in the sky. It was unknown when, but layers of dark clouds had gathered in the sky, and a heart-palpitating aura began to spread. Swish, swish. Many of the spectators who were resting with their eyes closed opened their eyes at this moment. Everyone looked at the dark clouds above the square, and their eyes began to ripple. Has a Tao artifact started to succeed? Everyone's eyes were filled with anticipation. Dark clouds gathered, and there were faint flashes of lightning. That was the sign of the lightning tribulation. Hula! The dark clouds gathered in front of a middle-aged man. Inside his spiritual stove and symbol cauldron, a large blade appeared. The mysterious patterns of the talisman fluctuated, and its aura was astonishing. But in the end, this middle-aged tool symbol master did not attract the lightning tribulation. Even the half-Tao artifact was a little worse. Although he succeeded in refining it, this middle-aged tool symbol master's eyes were filled with regret. He had no choice but to leave. However, the middle-aged tool symbol master's departure had already received cheers from the spectators' seats. To be able to refine a talisman weapon that was close to the half-Tao artifact level at the Myriad Weapon Convention was already extraordinary. Walala! Soon after, many dark clouds gathered, and many talisman weapons that were close to the half-Tao artifact level appeared. One by one, the tool symbol masters left the field, looking happy and worried. There were also those who were unlucky and failed when they were close to the half-Tao artifact level. The spiritual stove and symbol cauldron exploded, and blood spurted out. It was extremely regretful. On the judge's seat, behind Elder Ko Jixiong of the Hall of Aliath, a young man sat upright. His temperament was excellent. His long black hair was combed extremely smoothly, and his whole body was snow-white. The young man's face was also very handsome, but at this time, his face was gloomy. Facing the square, he did not even raise his eyes. Facing the myriad weapon symbol masters in the square, he seemed to not care about them. Official Qin, when the time comes, let's go back to the hall first. As long as they are in the spirit domain, they can't escape. Elder Ko Jixiong turned around and transmitted his voice to the white-clothed young man. The white-clothed young man raised his head. His long and narrow eyes carried a kind of feminine aura. Only then did he look indifferently at the square. Suddenly, the white-clothed young man's gaze trembled. On the square, among the sparse hundreds of people, a purple figure appeared in his eyes. That figure was wearing a purple soft armor and a purple mask. That figure killed his father, Emperor Chujiang, and razed the Chujiang royal residence to the ground. Even if it turned into ashes, he could still recognize it. How could he forget it? It's him, it's that Xiao Feng. Official Qin's eyes suddenly changed greatly. He directly stood up and stared at the young man in purple soft armor in front of him. Coldness shot out from his eyes. Coincidentally, during the Myriad Weapon Conference, he and his master brought many people from Alioth Hall back to Chujiang City to search for Xiao Feng. However, Xiao Feng and the others had already disappeared without a trace. After that, they came to the Myriad Weapon Conference in Great Weapon City. They originally thought that Xiao Feng and the others had already disappeared without a trace. Who would have thought that they would find them without any effort after searching high and low for them? As Official Qin suddenly stood up, the coldness in his eyes spread and killing intent shot out. Many of the judges' gazes instantly fell on Official Qin. Elder Zhu Shou, Artifact Addict Guang Hongwang, Elder Yun Ziqin, Elder Yin Xuanlong, and the others all looked at Official Qin. Official Qin, that person is that Xiao Feng? Elder Ko Jixiong's expression instantly changed. His gaze followed Official Qin's gaze and swept across Du Xiaofu. In the end, he looked at Official Qin and asked, "Master, it's that kid." Even if he turned into ashes, Disciple would still recognize him. "Master, you must uphold justice for Disciple." Official Qin nodded. His eyes were scarlet red. The hatred of his father's murder was absolutely irreconcilable. He absolutely could not let that Xiao Feng go. "Elder Ko, what's going on?" Elder Zhu Xiu looked at Ko Jixiong and asked. His gaze was calm, as if he was smiling at all times. "There's someone called Xiao Feng here. He killed my Yuheng Hall's protector Zhiming and massacred thousands of people from the Chujiang royal residence. Even my disciple, Official Qin, was killed by him." Coldness flashed across Ko Jixiong's eyes. However, there was also some surprise in his eyes. That mysterious youth, Xiao Feng, seemed to be quite young. Was he really as powerful as his disciple, Official Qin, had said? "Oh, Elder Zhu Shou, Elder Yun Ziqin, Artifact Addict Guang Hongwang, Elder Yin Xuanlong," and the others were all somewhat astonished when they heard Elder Ko Jixiong's words. Their gazes passed through the crowd in the plaza and curiously looked at Du Xiaofu. "That young man doesn't seem to be very old. I've met Chujiang City's Chujiang Emperor once before. He's a martial emperor at the peak of the profound realm. Could it be that that young man really has the ability to kill Protector Zhiming and Chujiang Emperor?" Elder Yin Xuanlong of the Tianji Hall looked at the youth who was refining weapons on the plaza with a rather heroic face. There was some doubt and astonishment in his eyes. If that youth could kill Chujiang Emperor and Protector Zhiming, how powerful must he be? This was absolutely inconceivable. "I woke up at 4 p.m. today and didn't slack off at all. I don't know why, but I'm a bit stuck and only managed to write this chapter now. I know that many brothers are waiting for me to update, so I sincerely apologize. I also hope that brothers can understand. I guess it's because I've been staying up late for a few nights, so I'm feeling a bit drowsy. Little you will continue to write and update a lot. I also plan to sleep early today so that it won't affect the update." Chapter 8:14. There should be something strange about that brat. However, we cannot let him off since he dared to touch a member of Yuheng Hall and killed a protector of Yuheng Hall. Ko Jixiong said in a deep voice as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. That youth is forging steadily. His every action is controlled and confident. His control of the flame's temperature is extremely precise, and there is no excessive consumption. This is also a great test of mental energy and spiritual strength. Weapon addict Guang Hongwang looked at the purple soft-armored youth with some astonishment in his eyes as he said, "That youth's weapon refinement seems simple and ordinary, but he is actually extremely talented in weapon refinement. He's not simple at all." "Elder Ko, if that young man has a grudge with Yuheng Palace Hall, let's settle it after the Myriad Weapon Convention. Right now, we are still in the Myriad Weapon Convention. Everyone is watching us. The entire Central State is watching us. Our every move is being watched by all the guests." Elder Zhu Xiu softly said. His eyes were fixed on the purple-armored young man's figure as he stared at him with interest. "I will settle it after the Myriad Weapon meeting." Ko Jixiong nodded. A cold glint flashed across his eyes as he looked at the youth in the plaza. Now was indeed not the time to make a move. "Master, Guan wanted to make a move immediately. He could not bear the grudge of his father's murder for even a moment. How could he bear to watch as the murderer of his father was right before his eyes? Don't be impatient. Don't make a fool of yourself in front of your elders. Sit down. Ko Jixiong softly chided. That brat was still participating in the myriad weapon meeting and was naturally unable to make a move. However, he was already in Great Weapon City, and there was no need to fear that he could escape. Guan only regained his senses after being chided by his master. He fiercely waited for the purple figure to wipe off the cold glint before he sat down and regained his composure. However, the cold glint in his eyes was difficult to suppress. This time, the disciples of Migres Hall have performed extremely well. Congratulations, Zhu Xiu. Weapon addict Guang Hongwang looked at the Migres Hall disciples who were forging weapons not far away from the judges' seats. They had performed extremely well. The majority of the Migres Palace's disciples were in the top 100. The few disciples who left the arena only had a low cultivation and were only here to train themselves. Artifact addict, aren't you being sarcastic? At the very most, these disciples this time around can only be considered to be rather stable. However, there aren't many outstanding individuals. Only Tao Yu alone can be considered to be not bad. Elder Zhu Xiu softly said. One could see that he was rather satisfied with the ethereal youth in the middle. This Tao Yu isn't just not bad. He has a 5-colored spiritual stove and a talisman cauldron. His mental strength is also out of the ordinary, and his spiritual roots are at the peak of the human king level. He has always been extremely intelligent in the field of artifact forging, and his comprehension is extremely high. I think that surpassing the two of us is only a matter of time. Weapon addict Guang Hongwang rolled his eyes at Elder Zhu Xiu. He was well aware of Tao Yu's attainments in weapon refining. He was the most outstanding disciple of this batch of Migres Palace disciples. He had many tricks up his sleeves and was definitely a peak existence among his peers. Elder Zhu Xiu smiled at Guang Hongwang and didn't say anything else. They were indeed well aware of Tao Yu's extraordinary attainments in refining artifacts. Night fell. In the dark night, brilliant lights overflowed and energy rippled like fireworks. Dark clouds converged in the sky and flashes of lightning could be faintly seen. High-grade talisman artifacts that were closest to the level of pseudo-Dao artifacts appeared one after another, causing the surroundings to be as bright as day. The dense crowd of onlookers discussed spiritedly. Until the next morning, there were less than 20 talisman masters in the entire square who were still refining artifacts. A thick layer of dark clouds had also converged in the sky above the entire great artifact city. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Boom! Winds and clouds surged in the sky as the energy of the world fluctuated strangely. A strange and astonishing aura that made one's soul palpitate rippled in the air above the square and quickly spread in all directions. The aura of pressure is getting stronger. Is a Dao artifact really going to appear? The crowd of onlookers in the surroundings of the square began to clamor. The aura that spread invisibly made the hearts of the onlookers tremble violently. Boom! A short moment later, rumbling sounds suddenly came from the spiritual stove and talisman cauldron in front of an old man. A short spear blade rushed out of the spiritual stove and talisman cauldron, engraved with dazzling talisman patterns. A dazzling light soared into the sky, and an astonishing aura fluctuated as if it was alive. The pressure was astonishing. Withdraw. The old man opened his mouth and lightly shouted. With a wave of his hand, the short spear appeared in his hand, and a terrifying aura rippled in all directions. It can be considered a pseudo-Dao artifact. It almost attracted a 1-star lightning tribulation, but it's still missing the last step. Looking at the short spear in the hands of the old man below the square, Guang Hongwang, who was in the referee's seat, said softly. The old talisman master looked at the short spear in his hand and revealed a smile. However, looking at the dozen or so talisman masters who were still refining artifacts, the old man's eyes couldn't help but become worried again. At the level of pseudo-Dao artifacts, there was still suspense if they wanted to enter the top 10. A moment later, the square surged again as more than a dozen talisman masters appeared one after another. All of them were pseudo-Dao artifacts, shaking the square. The surrounding spectators were in an uproar as they watched the pseudo-Dao artifacts appear one after another. Apart from the myriad weapon conference, it was really hard to see these pseudo-Dao artifacts appear one after another. The majority of the dozen or so talisman masters were young disciples of the Migres Palace, and all of them were pseudo-Dao artifacts. In the blink of an eye, there were only 5 people left in the entire square. There's hope now. In the VIP seats, a martial king old man behind Shangguan, he was pleasantly surprised. At this last moment, there were actually 2 people who could still remain in the square who represented the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion this time. One was Xiaofeng and the other was the Talisman King, Lu Zhenghan. Shangguan He's eyes also revealed some fluctuations of joy. The last 5 people were still in the square. Everyone knew that those who had not succeeded at this time were naturally of a higher level. At this moment, there were still 2 people in the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion. As long as they didn't make a mistake at the last moment, the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion would be rich this time. It's a little unusual this time. In the judge's seat, Elder Yun Zichin of the Migres Palace looked at the last 5 people in the square with some astonishment in her eyes. It's a little unexpected. Elder Zhu Xiu's eyes also moved, and his body that was about to die sat up a little. At this moment, only 2 of the last 5 people in the square were disciples of the Migres Palace. The other 3 were all outside of the Migres Palace. I know one of them. His name is Lu Zhenghan, and he's quite famous outside. He does have some ability in refining. As for the youth called Xiaofeng, he's always been calm and I can't see through him. Guang Hongweng looked at the last person in the square and frowned slightly. He softly said, "The black-robed man gives me a feeling that he's hard to see through. His origin is unfamiliar." I have some impression of that Lu Zhenghan. He seems to have participated in the Myriad Weapon Conference a few times. Elder Zhu Xiu looked at the square. Other than Tao Yu and the other 2 disciples of the Migres Palace, there was also Xiaofeng and Lu Zhenghan. The last person was an unfamiliar black-robed man. His attire was rather peculiar and his face was covered by a black hood. Even his appearance could not be seen clearly. However, the aura on his body was within the limits of a perfect 6-star talisman master. Just as Zhu Xiu's voice sounded, the numerous experts in the judge's seat seemed to have sensed something at the same time. Many of them raised their heads and looked towards the sky. Chapter 8:15. Just as Zhu Xiu's voice fell, many experts at the referee seats seemed to have felt something at the same time, and many of them raised their heads to look at the sky. Under the gazes of the crowd, a vast expanse of dark clouds rolled, and then condensed into an enormous dark cloud lightning ball. Rumbling thunders could be heard, and strange black spell symbols could be seen spreading in the air. On the dark cloud lightning ball, there was a terrifying aura that caused the sky to inexplicably tremble. A silent pressure spread out, causing the spectators around the plaza to feel fear. 1-star lightning tribulation. This is the appearance of an elementary rank Dao artifact. Only elementary rank Dao artifacts can attract 1-star lightning tribulation. A true elementary rank Dao artifact has appeared. That's a disciple of the Migres Palace, right? It doesn't seem to be Tao Yu. That's Yu Mingyuan, also a disciple of the Migres Palace. He's at the perfect 6-star realm, and he's able to forge an elementary rank Dao artifact. He's too powerful. As the enormous dazzling dark cloud lightning ball condensed, the surrounding spectators whispered in shock. Many surprised gazes in the entire plaza immediately focused on one of the young men in the plaza. I didn't think that Yu Mingyuan would also reach this step. It can be considered to have surprised me. On the referee's seat, Elder Zhu Xiu's aged face also showed some surprise. At this moment, all of the gazes in the entire plaza were tightly focused on the Migres Palace youth, Yu Mingyuan. The enormous dark lightning ball collapsed behind him, and the silver snake wreaked havoc in the sky, spreading its pressure. Boom! Almost at the same time, dark clouds gathered in the sky once again. Once again, 3 dark cloud lightning balls appeared, circling above the heads of Du Xiaofu, Tao Yu, and the mysterious black-robed man. Could it be that 4 Dao artifacts will appear this time? The continuous appearance of the dark cloud lightning balls caused a strong shock to surge out of the hearts of the spectators. The terrifying might of thunder surged and filled the sky. That purple soft-armored man and the black-robed man are actually experts in artifact forging as well. Many of the surrounding spectators couldn't help but tremble as they spoke. I didn't think that little brother Xiaofeng would actually have such shocking attainments in artifact forging. 1-star lightning tribulation. Brother Xiaofeng, hold on. Behind Shangguan He, the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion's 2 martial kings, talisman masters, and martial marquee cultivators all clenched their fists when they saw this. Their hearts were in their throats. At this moment, Shangguan He's eyes were also filled with excitement and nervousness. 1-star thunder tribulation was the precursor to the appearance of a low-grade Dao artifact. As long as they could refine a low-grade Dao artifact, the Sky Treasure Pavilion would have struck it rich this time. Only Bailey Su remained indifferent. He glanced at the black cloud and lightning ball behind Du Xiaofu and didn't care at all. He had personally witnessed Du Xiaofu attracting a 2-star lightning tribulation with just a wave of his hand. At this moment, this 1-star lightning tribulation was simply something that this freak was deliberately hiding. Rumble. Under everyone's watchful gazes, many trembling gazes, Yuming Yuan's 1-star lightning tribulation had finally begun. Dark clouds surged around the edges of the dark lightning ball, and streaks of silver lightning surged out. The lightning might that spread out caused the hairs on one's body to suddenly stand. Boom! A bolt of lightning flashed out, and the lightning trembled. In the end, it pierced through space and descended. Swish! As the lightning descended, the might of the lightning tribulation caused the scalps of all the spectators to feel as if they were about to explode. Finally, the terrifying lightning directly bombarded the battle mace that was hovering above the spiritual furnace symbol cauldron in front of Yu Mingyuan. Bang bang! The lightning exploded, and the lightning on the battle mace wreaked havoc into the sky, dazzling the sky in all directions. Poochie! Yu Mingyuan spat out a mouthful of blood. His originally pale face immediately turned pale, and his body staggered back a step. Electric light fluctuated on his body, but in the end, he was able to resist the terrifying might of the lightning tribulation. Buzz! A battle mace soared through the sky, emitting the sound of wind and thunder. The talisman runes on it flickered, faintly accompanied by the remnants of lightning. The surrounding space faintly distorted, releasing an astonishing power. It's a success, a low-grade Dao artifact. Weapon addict Guang Hongweng smiled slightly, his eyes filled with praise. It's a bit unexpected. Elder Zhu Shou also smiled slightly. He was also surprised that Yu Mingyuan was able to successfully refine a low-grade Dao artifact. Suddenly, weapon addict Guang Hongweng looked surprised. At this time, the black clouds and lightning ball behind the purple-armored youth seemed to have been affected by Yu Mingyuan's 1-star tribulation and started to gradually disperse. The black clouds dispersed, and Du Xiaofu's spiritual furnace symbol cauldron appeared. Engraved with talisman runes, it released rays of light. Sigh, I thought that youth would be able to refine a Dao artifact, but I didn't expect it to be only a semi-Dao artifact. Weapon addict Guang Hongweng was somewhat disappointed. He had always held some hope for that purple-armored youth, but in the end, he only managed to refine a semi-Dao artifact. To be able to trigger a 1-star tribulation, although it failed in the end due to its influence, it's still a peak existence among semi-Dao artifacts. His attainments are also extremely high. Elder Zhu Xiu said softly, looking a bit surprised. That youth had clearly been calm all along, and according to reason, Yu Mingyuan's influence in the surroundings shouldn't have affected him so much. But in the end, that youth was still one step away, which was quite a pity. Humph! Officer Qin coldly snorted, and his gaze swept towards the square. A semi-Dao artifact, but it should be the closest to an elementary Dao artifact. In the spectator seats, the people of the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion looked at the curved blade in front of Du Xiaofu, and they were already extremely satisfied. It's already exceeded my expectations. A smile appeared on Shangguan He's face. It was not difficult for him to feel that even though Xiaofeng had only successfully forged a quasi-Dao artifact, it should still be at the peak of the quasi-Dao artifact level. There should be no suspense for him to enter the top 10. What is this kid doing? Only Bailey Sue had a face full of suspicion, but this matter had already become a foregone conclusion. Entering the top 10 wasn't a problem, but it was impossible for him to win the championship. Just now, a disciple of the Migres Palace had already refined a Tao artifact. Could it be that he just wants to enter the Migres Palace and doesn't want to shine too much? After a moment, Bailey Sue's eyes moved. It wasn't hard to guess Du Xiaofu's true intentions, and then his eyes trembled. Bailey Sue couldn't help but be shocked. With that kid's age, to be able to restrain his strength in such an occasion and not fight for it, this kind of temperament and determination was terrifying enough. If it was someone else, not to mention a young person, even if it was an old person, how many of them would be able to have such temperament and determination in such an occasion? At this moment, far away from Du Xiaofu's refining position, Lu Zhenghan glanced sideways at Du Xiaofu. Seeing that Du Xiaofu had only stopped at the semi-Dao artifact, he couldn't help but let out a cold snort, and his eyes revealed a sneer. Then, the hand seals in Lu Zhenghan's hands changed, transforming into waves of mysterious talisman runes that rushed into the spiritual furnace in front of him. Walala! Suddenly, dark clouds gathered behind Lu Zhenghan's back, slowly condensing into a dark cloud and lightning ball. It was actually a sign that it was about to reach the elementary Dao artifact level, which also caused many people to be shocked and astonished. Walala! In front of the referee's seat, Tao Yu's hand seals changed, condensing hand seals one after another, and finally began to reveal mysterious talisman runes in front of him. These mysterious talisman runes lined up and condensed in front of him, instantly condensing into a huge demonic tiger shadow. Oh! The demonic tiger shadow roared, as if thunder was rumbling. The mysterious talisman runes all over its body spat out, ferocious and incomparably fierce, its power shocking the heavens. Beast energy. Tao Yu wants to fuse beast energy into the Dao artifact. At this moment, the gazes of many experts in the referee's seats trembled. Weapon addict Guang Hongwang's old body trembled slightly, revealing a look of shock. He said in surprise, "I didn't expect Tao Yu to be able to comprehend to this extent. How astonishing! It seems that I have underestimated him." Elder Zhu Xiu also revealed a look of surprise at this moment, and then his face was full of smiles. Fusing beast energy into a talisman artifact was left behind by the Hall Master, but it was incomplete, and one could only rely on one's own comprehension. For Tao Yu to be able to reach this step, his talent was truly astonishing, and even Elder Zhu Xiu couldn't help but praise him. Du Xiaofu was also surprised as he looked at Tao Yu. It was a familiar secret technique from the Secret Soldier mantra. By inscribing the beast energy secret technique into the weapon would be like a tiger that had grown wings and increase its power. Just looking at Tao Yu's display, Du Xiaofu could feel that the secret soldier arts Tao Yu was using was quite different from the real secret soldier arts on his body. There were many parts that were similar, but lacked spirit, and there were also many parts that were quite different. The demonic tiger shadow roared, before turning into a talisman rune and rushing into the spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron in front of Tao Yu. Whistling sounds resounded, colliding with the 7-foot-long spear in the spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron in front of Tao Yu. Rumble! The spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron in front of Tao Yu shook loudly, and this kind of impact almost made Tao Yu unable to control himself. The process of fusing beast energy into a Dao artifact and engraving the talisman runes from the secret technique of beast energy onto the weapon was extremely difficult and complicated. Every talisman rune was not something that could be easily inscribed. Tao Yu persevered, and a black cloud formed behind him once again. A second black cloud of lightning was faintly discernible, showing signs of taking shape. Could it be that it's about to become a mid-grade Dao artifact? Following the appearance of the second black cloud of lightning behind Tao Yu, the whole place was in an uproar. This was a sign that a mid-grade Dao artifact was about to take shape. Walala! Suddenly, the space above the square began to tremble again. Under the shocked gazes of the people in the square, a second black cloud of lightning directly took shape behind the mysterious black-robed person. The two black lightning balls entrenched themselves like a pair of pearls. Almost at the same time, a third black cloud silently entrenched itself in the sky above the square behind the mysterious black-robed person. Heavens, is the tribulation of 3 stars about to begin? Attracting the tribulation of 3 stars, is a high-grade Tao artifact about to take shape? Looking at the third black cloud gathering in the sky above, all the spectators in the square trembled. Many people stood up in shock, their eyes filled with shock. At this moment, the experts in the referees' seats, including artifact addict Guang Hongwang, Elder Zhu Xiu, Elder Yun Ziqin, Elder Yin Xuanlong, and Ko Jixiang, all changed their expressions, and violent ripples appeared in their eyes. It took me 5:00 in the morning to finish. I apologize, everyone. Chapter 8:16. 3 stars lightning tribulation, signs of a high-grade Tao weapon appearing. This made everyone unable to suppress the shock in their hearts. And at this time, this sign was caused by the mysterious black-robed man. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the third dark cloud occupied the sky of the square. But in the end, the third dark cloud lightning ball did not form. Rumble. The lightning tribulation began. 2 stars of lightning tribulation fell, falling on the spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron in front of the mysterious black-robed man. Fuse. At the same time, strange hand seals condensed in Tao Yu's hands, all falling into the spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron in front of him. In front of Tao Yu, the talisman runes formed by the phantoms of the demonic tigers were gradually suppressed and inscribed into the 7-foot-long spear. Rumble. At the same time, the second dark cloud above Tao Yu's head did not form a lightning ball, only 1 star of lightning tribulation, and began to descend. Bang bang. The 2 stars of lightning tribulation caused by the mysterious black-robed man fell, and the surrounding stone platforms of the weapon and talisman masters all exploded one after another. The dazzling impact was dazzling. Ding ding. The mysterious black-robed man seemed to have suffered a huge impact, and his body was immediately wrapped in raging lightning. But then everything disappeared. The dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed, and the lightning tribulation also gradually disappeared. He resisted the 2 stars of lightning tribulation. Woo! In the mysterious black-robed man's spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron, a jet-black long saber appeared and rushed into the sky. The black brilliance spread, and the jet-black long saber carried a faint murderous aura. The shocking pressure made people's souls tremble. That was a peak mid-grade Tao weapon, already close to a high-grade Tao weapon, and its power was shocking, causing the semi-Tao weapons and talisman weapons refined by the weapon and talisman masters to tremble and almost crawl. Boom. Tao Yu's beast energy at the end could only cause a layer of dark clouds, and did not break through to the 2 stars of lightning tribulation. 1 star of lightning tribulation, only 1 bolt of lightning. The vast lightning fell, and the spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron in front of Tao Yu raged, releasing light, and a large area of space exploded. The 2 of them almost faced the lightning tribulation at the same time. 1 star of lightning tribulation, the other of 2 stars of lightning tribulation, causing all the spectators around the square to hold their breaths, nervously looking at the square. The lightning tribulation was extremely violent. It came slowly but left quickly. Soon after, the dazzling lightning gradually dissipated and a 7-foot-long spear flew out from the messy square. On the 7-foot-long spear, a tiger's roar could be faintly heard, and the pressure it exuded was extremely shocking. Although this 7-foot-long spear was only at the peak of the initial grade Tao artifact, it actually had the power of a middle-grade Tao artifact. I've heard that every disciple of the Migres Palace is extraordinary. The disciples of the Migres Palace have unparalleled attainments in refining weapons in the central state. I wonder if they live up to their reputation. Amidst the shock, a voice rang out from the square at this moment. The tone of the voice was extremely cold. At the same time, the black saber forged by the mysterious black-clothed man suddenly emitted a terrifying aura. Swish! The black long saber seemed to have turned into a bolt of lightning, directly striking towards the 7-foot-long spear that had just swept out. At this moment, everyone turned pale with fright. Countless gazes were filled with astonishment. No one had expected something like this to happen at the very last moment. Aoo. At the same time, the 7-foot-long spear forged by Tao Yu roared. Its entire body glowed, as if it had transformed into a giant tiger, and pounced towards the black saber. Swish! The black saber and the 7-foot-long spear clashed, emitting a resplendent light. The two Tao artifacts continuously clashed in midair. The sound of metal clashing could be heard endlessly, sparks flew in all directions, and clanging sounds reverberated endlessly. This scene caused the surrounding spectators to be flabbergasted. This was the first time they had encountered such a battle. Elder Zhu Xiu, what should we do now? Looking at the battle in the square, an old man behind Elder Zhu Xiu, who was seated at the referee's seat, asked Elder Zhu Xiu worriedly. This is a weapon battle. That black-robed man wants to directly determine the victor between him and Tao Yu. Although it was not explained in detail in the assembly, this does not violate the rules. We cannot interfere. Elder Zhu Xiu's expression secretly fluctuated. His expression that had been as calm as an ancient well also slightly changed at this moment. The other party seemed to have come for Migre's palace. If Tao Yu lost, then the one who lost would not only be Tao Yu, but the entire Migre's palace. Once Tao Yu lost, from then on, Migre's palace would no longer be able to represent the holy land of spirit domain's artifact masters. That guy is mysterious, too mysterious. The aura on his body cannot be seen through. He should have a secret technique. However, I feel that he should not only be at the level of complete 6-star. I fear that he is hiding his strength. The artifact addict Guang Hongweng's gaze was also slightly focused at this moment. He could feel some abnormalities, but could not completely see through them. From the looks of it, that person has indeed used some kind of secret technique to hide his strength. In the end, it directly draped over the 7-foot-long spear, cutting the demon tiger phantom on the 7-foot-long spear. Then, the saber light directly descended and fiercely struck the 7-foot-long spear, creating dazzling sparks. Clanging sounds rang out incessantly. Crackle! A deep crack appeared on the 7-foot-long spear. The level of the Tao artifact was also damaged. It turned into a ray of flowing light and swiftly returned to Tao Yu's hand. At this moment, Tao Yu spat out a mouthful of blood. His ethereal eyes dimmed, and his face was deathly pale. He staggered backwards. The entire square was silent. The eyes of all the Migre's palace disciples were dim and lifeless. At the judges' seats, the expressions of many experts also changed. The long spear Tao artifact that Tao Yu had forged seemed to lose without much suspense. At this moment, the Migre's palace that represented the holy land of the artifact symbol masters of the entire spirit domain had lost at the hands of an unknown and mysterious black-robed person. The face of the Migre's palace had been completely swept away this time. This person did it on purpose. He seems to have come specifically to target the Migre's palace. Elder Zhu Xiu's old face was grave, but there was nothing he could do at this moment. The other party's strength was clearly higher than the perfect 6-star level, but he had suppressed his presence at the perfect 6-star level. Even if they acted now, if word got out, people would think that the Migre's palace was abusing their power to bully others, and that they could not afford to lose to an outsider. This would be even more damaging to the reputation of the Migre's palace. Ha 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 ha. Rumor has it that the Migre's palace created by the artifact Venerable is the holy land of artifact symbol masters. The disciples of the Migre's palace are all outstanding existences among artifact symbol masters. Seeing it today, it is only a so-so. The Migre's palace is only average, and not enough to become the holy land of artifact symbol masters of the spirit domain. The mysterious black-robed person sneered. His voice echoed in the square and spread towards the entire great artifact city. Then, he raised his head slightly. The dark eyes under the black robe flashed. He looked at Elder Zhu Xiu, the artifact addict, Guang Hongweng, and the others at the judges' seats. He said, "Now, judges, please announce the first place of this Myriad Artifact Convention. I think the Myriad Artifact Convention has already ended. The innocent knows that they are innocent. We cannot let others deliberately think that there is an opportunity to take advantage of. Any one of us should be enough to make that person use his true cultivation. At that time, the truth will be revealed. Otherwise, the the reputation of the Migres Palace will be greatly damaged. Chapter 8:17. Merak Hall's elder Yun Ziqin said softly beside Elder Zhu Xiu. She could tell that the black-robed man seemed to have concealed his aura, but he had used strength that exceeded a six-star symbol master. Once the black-robed man's true strength was revealed, he could be suppressed or even killed. This is the worst plan. No matter what, the Migres Hall's reputation has already been affected. Elder Zhu Xiu's eyes narrowed as he sighed slightly. He did not expect the outcome of this myriad weapon conference to be like this. Are we just going to let that scheming person do as he pleases? Elder Yin Xuanlong also said softly as he frowned slightly on his heroic face. Although the seven-star hall did things their own way, they were still united. At this moment, the Migres Hall's reputation had been damaged, and the other 6 halls had also been damaged. They were bound together for good or ill. It's my mistake. I did not take precautions beforehand. Elder Zhu Xiu sighed. There was no other way now. The Migres Hall's reputation this time could not be recovered no matter what. What? Could it be that the judges do not dare to announce the result because the Migres Hall's disciple did not take first place? Looks like the Migres Hall's reputation is undeserved. They can only let the Migres Hall's disciple take first place. The mysterious black-robed man looked at the judges' seats as his gloomy and cold laughter echoed around the square. All the experts at the judges' seats looked at each other with an extremely ugly expression. They all knew that there was no need to judge at this moment. The first place of this myriad weapon conference was already this mysterious black-robed man. As for the other 9 people, everyone at the judges' seats already knew in their hearts. Sigh. Elder Zhu Xiu stood up as his body trembled. He sighed softly and was about to speak. Wait! Suddenly, just as Elder Zhu Xiu was about to speak, a voice abruptly sounded. As the voice sounded, the gazes of many at the judges' seats moved slightly. Following the voice, everyone's gazes landed on the mysterious masked young man in purple soft armor on the square. The voice from before had come from that young man's mouth. At this moment, the mysterious black-robed man's gaze could not help but look towards Du Xiaofu. Under everyone's gazes, Du Xiaofu's figure slowly walked out as he looked at the mysterious black-robed man and said, "It's too early to announce the result of the myriad weapon conference. Let's wait until I've finished refining it." Hearing this, the mysterious black-robed man's eyes flashed as he said, "Kid, you seem to have already refined. Do you want to refine it from the beginning? You still want to refine it from the beginning? If you still want more, you can come back 10 years. You. What is Brother Qiao Feng Brother Qiao? What? Everyone's in Qiu's in the heavenly pavilion, Shangguan Lu, Luo's Lu Lu Tu, Yun Tu's Nong Tu's Tu, S Lu Se Lu Yun. Is this too? At this moment, Bailey Su's expression turned complicated as his face was filled with doubt. Du Xiaofu's gaze swept across the mysterious black-robed man. He raised his head slightly and looked towards Elder Zhu Xiu at the referee's seat as he asked, "Elder Zhu Xiu, if I continue to refine, it shouldn't be against the rules, right?" Elder Zhu Xiu looked at Du Xiaofu with doubt in his eyes. After which, he said to Du Xiaofu, "If you continue to refine the symbol weapon that you've just refined, it will naturally not be against the rules. The rules of the Myriad Weapon Conference do not say that a symbol master cannot take a break midway. However, if you refine and refine another symbol weapon, it will be against the rules." "Thank you, Elder Zhu Xiu. I'll continue refining then." Du Xiaofu faintly smiled as he slowly took a few steps forward. He looked at the mysterious black-robed man and said, "You said that the Migres Palace is only us. However, I do not agree. Although you've refined a peak middle-tier Dao weapon, it is far inferior to a peak middle-tier Dao weapon of the same level refined by a disciple of the Migres Palace. It's simply impossible to compare." Haha. Hearing these words, the black-robed man stared blankly at Du Xiaofu. After which, his gaze twitched as he immediately laughed heartily. "Kid, with the incomplete Dao weapon that you've refined, saying all this doesn't seem very convincing. It's better for you to return home." "I've said it before. I haven't finished refining." Du Xiaofu took a few more steps forward. His voice was flat, but it invisibly reverberated in the air above the entire plaza, allowing everyone to clearly hear it. He said, "The Migres Palace that Senior Weapon Sovereign created is naturally worthy of its reputation as a holy land for refining weapons. I've always yearned for Senior Weapon Sovereign's extraordinary refining techniques and have never forgotten them. There will definitely be an echo. Finally, by chance, I've obtained some superficial knowledge of refining that Senior Weapon Sovereign had unintentionally passed down, and have also comprehended some superficial knowledge. Now, I'd better continue refining my symbol weapon." As his voice faded, Du Xiaofu's footsteps stopped in front of an undamaged refining spot in the plaza. Swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, there were more than hundreds of millions of gazes in the plaza. All of them were dumbfounded as they stared at the masked young man in purple soft armor. At the judges' seats, weapon addict Guang Hongwang, Elder Zhu Xiu, Elder Yin Xuanlong, Elder Yun Ziqin, and the others, as well as Tao Yu and Yu Mingyuan of the Migres Palace, they all looked at each other, before looking at the mysterious young man with incomparable astonishment. At this moment, only Qin Guan and Ko Jixiong had extremely complicated and gloomy expressions on their faces. At this moment, Weapon King Lu Zhenghan, who had struggled to get up at some point in time, was also staring at Du Xiaofu with astonishment on his deathly pale face. This kid, what method will he use to turn the tables? Bailey Su pondered, to the point that his head hurt. Bailey Su really couldn't think of anything. At this time, everything was already settled. What method could that kid use to turn the tables? Unless time flowed backwards and he could refine it again. Du Xiaofu looked in front of him and turned a deaf ear to the countless gazes in the surroundings. With a wave of his hand, the half-Dao artifact that he had just finished refining floated out. The curve of the curved blade was moving. On the outside of the blade, mysterious runes flickered. On the moving curve, there was a deep cold glint. Bang! Du Xiaofu condensed a hand seal, and a terrifying aura burst out from his body. The runes in front of him rapidly gathered and arranged themselves, condensing into a spiritual furnace and a symbol cauldron. A blazing aura spread out, and the mysterious runes flickered incessantly. A powerful aura surged out like a wave. However, this spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron still had 3 bright colors and 2 dark colors. It was just that it was the same 3-colored spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron as before. However, in the next instant, the 3-colored spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron in front of Du Xiaofu started to flicker, and the 2 hidden elements flickered. Bang! In an instant, white, green, black, scarlet, and yellow lights of 5 different kinds of energy whizzed out from the spiritual stove and symbol cauldron in front of Du Xiaofu. Carrying a kind of faint golden radiance, a vast and mighty aura whizzed through the air. This was a 5-colored spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron, but compared to the one condensed by Tao Yu before, it was clearly a bit more tyrannical. A 5-colored spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron. This is a full attribute spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron. This mysterious youth had been hiding all this time. As expected, he was hiding something. At this moment, everyone was shocked and flabbergasted. Compared to the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron condensed by Tao Yu, it's even a bit more powerful. He actually hid it so deeply. Elder Zhu Xiu, tool addict Guang Hongwang, Elder Yun Ziqin, and the others were immediately shocked. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. These were the best spiritual furnaces and symbol cauldrons, and they clearly understood what they represented. In the distance, Lu Zhenghan looked at the 5-colored spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron in front of Du Xiaofu. He was stupefied, and his jaw dropped for a long time. Brother Qiaofeng still wants to refine it. That's a full attribute spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron. In the VIP seats, Shangguan He and all the people from the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion were suddenly pleasantly surprised. Who? Du Xiaofu took a deep breath, and his whole body flickered with a dazzling white radiance. His mental energy spread out, and inside the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron, a blazing flame rose, once again wrapping around the curved blade. In the center of the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron, mysterious talisman patterns immediately spread out from the curved blade, and an astonishing aura connected the space and the energy of the world. At the same time, Du Xiaofu's hands condensed one after another, and finally started to reveal a dazzling green-red talisman pattern. The green-red dazzling talisman patterns arranged themselves and condensed, instantly condensing into the image of a profound cloud scarlet dragon. Suddenly, golden talisman patterns surged, and finally condensed into an incomparably huge golden python in front of Du Xiaofu. The silver talisman pattern spread, and in a short time, the image of a silver-winged demonic eagle appeared in front of Du Xiaofu, its aura sweeping out like a vast ocean. Talisman markings surged once more, and it transformed into the image of an enormous bird that flapped its wings and circled in the air. This bird was shaped like a black bird, with 3 heads and 6 tails. It was an extremely terrifying swan and eye. There were also talisman patterns flickering, and the 5th talisman pattern condensed into an image that floated in front of Du Xiaofu. It was a huge frost demonic python. Roar! Goo goo! At this moment, the profound cloud scarlet dragon roared, domineering and ferocious, its power shocking the heavens. The golden demonic python hissed, and a fishy cold aura overflowed, surging in the air. The silver-winged demonic eagle flapped its wings, evil and unparalleled. The image of the swan and eye spread its wings, and the image was fierce and ferocious, as if it wanted to tear this part of the sky into pieces. The frost demonic python coiled up, freezing the sky. I stayed up until noon and was afraid that I would be delayed in updating today, so I might as well update twice. Today, I still need to update once Little U wakes up in the evening. But if Little U doesn't update the 3rd time before 11 o'clock in the evening, then Little U will make up for it. Today, I must adjust my schedule. Brothers, please bear with me. Chapter 8:18. The 5 beast phantoms roared, accompanied by the rumbling of thunder. The mysterious talisman patterns spat out, as if there was an aura that could suppress everything, sweeping through heaven and earth. The 5 terrifying beast phantoms, under Du Xiaofu's control, turned into dazzling talisman patterns in the midst of roaring and howling, and charged straight into the scimitar in the cauldron. Roar! In an instant, roars and howls resounded through the sky. The dazzling talisman patterns and the dazzling talisman patterns on the scimitar began to collide, surging in all directions. At this moment, Du Xiaofu used the secret soldier arts method of fusing beast energy, and he used it with all his strength. The Migres Palace was created by his master, and at this moment, the Migres Palace had lost face. Someone was purposely targeting the Migres Palace, and Du Xiaofu finally couldn't hold back. He wanted to turn the tables and compete with the mysterious black-robed man. Walala! Energy surged, and Du Xiaofu simultaneously controlled the 5 beast energy talisman patterns to fuse into the scimitar. The beast energy talisman patterns were engraved on the scimitar, causing the scimitar to fuse with beast energy. The difficulty and complexity of arranging 5 beast energies at the same time had already reached a terrifying level. However, the opponent was a peak middle-grade Dao artifact, and Du Xiaofu had no choice but to use all his strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to turn the tables. However, at this moment, when Du Xiaofu was fusing beast energy with all his strength, everyone inside and outside the plaza was stunned. The ones who were even more shocked were Migres Palace's Yu Mingyuan, Tao Yu, and the others. Elder Zhu Xiu, the artifact addict, Guang Hongwang, and the others all stood up in shock. Their faces changed drastically, and their bodies trembled. Completely fusing beast energy. This is the complete method of the secret soldier art. Elder Zhu Xiu trembled, and his old face, which was as calm as an ancient well, rippled violently. Elder Yun Ziqin, Elder Yin Xuanlong, Elder Ko Jixiang, and the mysterious black-robed man's gazes all changed drastically at this moment. At the same time, a dense energy fluctuation that couldn't be dispelled silently appeared in the sky above the plaza. The aura made one's soul throbbing, and then a dark cloud covered the sky. Boom! In just a short period of time, thunderous roars came from within the dark clouds. An aura that made one's soul tremble spread across the entire Great Fortune City and even further away. Tribulation lightning has appeared. Seeing that the sky was covered by dark clouds again, an uproar broke out among the spectators. Only the venerable equipment master was able to activate the complete integration of beast energy. The Migres Palace was also incomplete. To be able to set up a 7-star beginner talisman array with a peak 6-star cultivation, this was definitely shocking talent. It's not a 7-star beginner talisman array. It's a 7-star mystery array. At this moment, Elder In Xuanlong could not help but exclaim in shock. After a few breaths of time after the 25 array flags appeared in the mysterious young man's hands, the 26th array flag appeared again. The 26 formation flags represented a 7-star arcane level talisman formation. Phew! At this moment, everyone in the judges' seats gasped. He was only at the peak of the consummate 6-star level, but he was able to set up a mysterious 7-star talisman formation. Such a terrifying talent could only be described as monstrous. Is that kid a monster or a pervert? Weapon addict Guang Hongweng's old face was flushed with shock. He was dumbfounded and dumbfounded. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. Whoosh, whoosh. The 26 array flags flew out from Du Xiaofu's hands, then turned into beams of light that merged into the space, communicating with the energy of heaven and earth. A huge talisman array then condensed out of thin air. Boom! The talisman array appeared, covering the sky and the sun. The wind and clouds surged as if heaven and earth were shaking. At this moment, the energy of heaven and earth fluctuated. At this moment, everyone could feel that the energy of heaven and earth began to converge towards the talisman array, becoming more and more frantic. Finally, like a gale, it poured into the spiritual stove and talisman cauldron in front of the mysterious young man. Walala! The crazy energy of heaven and earth fluctuated, affecting the whole great Tool City. The terrifying energy of heaven and earth poured in, accompanied by the roars of beasts from the 5-colored spiritual stove and talisman cauldron in front of the mysterious young man. Spiritual Filling Cauldron Ascending Array. This is the legendary Spiritual Filling Cauldron Ascending Array. Elder Zhu Xiu cried out in shock, his face wild with joy. His eyes were filled with tears of excitement as he danced with joy like a 3-year-old child. Spiritual Filling Cauldron Ascending Array. Are you sure this is the Spiritual Filling Cauldron Ascending Array? As if struck by lightning, weapon addict Guang Hongweng immediately asked Elder Zhu Xiu. I can't be wrong. I can't be wrong. This is the Spiritual Filling Cauldron Ascending Array. This is the Spiritual Filling Cauldron Ascending Array, the unique skill of the Temple Master. Although I have never seen it with my own eyes, I can't be wrong. Elder Zhu Xiu trembled with excitement, bewildered. As the energy of heaven and earth poured in crazily, the second ball of lightning in the sky became more and more solid. At this moment, the mysterious black-robed man looked at this scene, and a trace of uneasiness finally appeared in his eyes. I didn't expect this kid to have such a trick up his sleeve. In the audience's seats, Bailey Su was also extremely shocked. Although he already knew that Du Xiaofu was extraordinary, this series of unforeseen events still left him dumbfounded. I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect this. Shangguan he had already stood up in excitement, and his fists were clenched nervously. In the sky, as the second ball of lightning in the dark clouds condensed, the third ball of lightning in the dark clouds directly appeared. The 3 balls of lightning were connected, and countless gazes inside and outside the square trembled. All of them were shocked. High-grade Dao artifact. This is forming a high-grade Dao artifact. In the referee's seats, Elder Zhu Xiu was so excited that he couldn't speak. Walala! In the square, Du Xiaofu's hands were still condensing strange hand seals at the same time. 5 beast-shaped phantoms turned into talisman mysterious runes and were gradually engraved on the curved blade. Then, the 3 huge dark lightning balls collapsed and pressed down at a low altitude behind him. Zizi, silver serpents of lightning wreaked havoc in the sky, and the pressure spread, causing people to feel an intense uneasiness in their hearts. The terrifying might of thunder surged and filled the sky. 3 stars of tribulation lightning. He's at the peak of the 6th star after all. Can he withstand it? Weapon addict Guang Hongwang, Yun Ziqin, Elder In Xuanlong and the others clenched their fists. Their hearts were in their throats, and they sucked in a breath of cold air. Rumble. Countless gazes looked at each other, and the talisman array in the square dissipated. A curved blade overflowed with light and floated above the spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron, releasing a dazzling light. All the gazes inside and outside the square trembled. The dark clouds at the edge of the ball of lightning in the sky churned, and the silver serpents of lightning fluctuated. The might of thunder that spread out caused all the hair on their bodies to stand on end. Boom! Finally, a bolt of lightning pierced through the space and landed on the curved blade above Du Xiaofu's spiritual furnace and talisman cauldron. The tribulation lightning descended. Resisting the tribulation lightning, the Tao artifact was completed. If it couldn't resist, all the previous efforts would be wasted, and the consequences would be unimaginable. If it was light, the artifact would be destroyed, and if it was heavy, the person would die. Zizi. Everything around the lightning was annihilated in an instant. Just looking at it made people's hair stand on end. This kind of tribulation lightning was not something that a human could resist. Boom, boom. Immediately after, the second and third lightning bolts descended in succession. It seemed that because Du Xiaofu was forcefully increasing the power of the Tao artifact, the tribulation lightning was especially fierce and violent. Zizi. In a short instant, 3 bolts of lightning descended almost at the same time. The power of the tribulation lightning that spread down made everyone's scalp feel like it was about to explode. Under the terrifying tribulation lightning, the souls of the onlookers trembled violently. At this moment, it was as if time had stopped. Everyone calmed down and stared at the square, falling into a strange silence. Only the sound of thunder resounded in the sky. I'm still in the hospital quarantine. Thank you for the concern of my brothers and sisters in the past few days. The doctor diagnosed me with viral rashes. I didn't have them when I was young, but I didn't expect that I would have rashes after growing up. It's not a big deal, just a high fever that hasn't subsided for a few days and nights, and a splitting headache. The old man said that I can't see strangers. This chapter took almost 5 hours to finish. With a high fever, I really can't write. The doctor also doesn't allow me to use my phone or computer, but I can't keep on updating. These few days, Little You will try his best to update once or twice. The chapters that I owe will be made up after Little You recovers. Little You bows and apologizes for the inconvenience caused to my brothers and sisters. Bow. In the next moment, the 5-colored talisman markings on the curved saber were like the sun. They soared into the sky, and a mighty and terrifying aura swept through the clouds. At this moment, all the spectators and the experts in the judges' seats on the high platform could feel the terrifying and domineering energy contained in the terrifying scimitar. Du Xiaofu raised his head slightly, the corners of his mouth curving into a smile under the mask. Lightning flickered on his body before it directly entered his body and disappeared. Chi. Du Xiaofu stomped on the ground, stirring up countless rocks. Then, he soared into the air. He reached out and grabbed the 5-colored scimitar. Buzz. At this moment, the sound of wind and thunder, accompanied by the roar of a beast, could be heard from the scimitar. The terrifying power swept through the sky, as if it was the king of the scimitar. It was domineering, strange, and unpredictable. High-grade doctrine artifact, baptized by the 3 stars thunder calamity, integrated with the power of the 5 beasts, and integrated with the energy of heaven and earth. It is comparable to a magic artifact. Weapon addict Guang Hongwang's old body was trembling, and his eyes were filled with excitement. At the peak of the complete 6-star realm, he resisted the 3 stars thunder calamity, refined a high-grade doctrine artifact, integrated with the spirit-filling array, and integrated with the power of beasts. For more than 1,000 years, no one in the Migres Palace could be compared to such talent, except for the palace master. Elder Zhu Shou was trembling, and tears flowed down his face. He muttered softly, "The secret weapon art has reappeared. I have no regrets even if I die before I am alive." Among the younger generation, I am inferior to him in terms of equipment refining. If I can get his guidance, I will be very lucky, Tao Yu muttered softly. He was envious, but not jealous. Brother Xiaofeng, well done. In the spectators' seats, Shang Guanhe's eyes were trembling uncontrollably. With his cultivation of the martial emperor realm, he shouted loudly. His voice was rolling, and it shocked Great Weapon City. Looking at the mysterious figure holding the five-colored scimitar in the sky, the quiet square suddenly burst into an uproar after a short moment of silence and astonishment. Xiaofeng. So that mysterious young man is called Xiaofeng. Xiaofeng, well done. He should be the Weapon Emperor. Weapon Emperor Xiaofeng. Who else can he be? Weapon Emperor. Weapon Emperor. Shocking cheers and shouts resounded through the clouds and the nine heavens. At this moment, Ko Jixiong and Qingguan, who were sitting in the judges' seats, had extremely complicated expressions on their faces. They were not in a good state. This kid, he is purposely trying to be in the limelight. Bailey Su recovered from his shock. When he saw Xiaofeng refining a middle-grade doctrine artifact with his own eyes, he was already scared out of his wits. Now that he saw a high-grade doctrine artifact being refined, Bailey Su was already numb. However, he could not help but suspect that Xiaofeng was purposely trying to be in the limelight, which was why the entire Great Weapon City was cheering for him. Du Xiaofu stepped into the air and looked at the mysterious man in black below. He said, "Since you like weapon battles, I will accompany you." After he finished speaking, the scimitar in Du Xiaofu's hand left his hand and turned into a five-colored thunderbolt, which headed straight for the mysterious man in black. Du Xiaofu attacked directly, leaving no room for discussion. It was overbearing and fierce, and he had done it intentionally. Who knows, he might be strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Why should I be afraid of you, young man? The mysterious man in black gritted his teeth and the black scimitar in his hand flew out. Black runes flickered, and a ferocious aura enveloped the scimitar. Roar! Ku! The black scimitars collided, and in an instant, mysterious runes exploded. A Xinyun scarlet dragon was overbearing and ferocious, and its power was shocking. A golden demonic python hissed, and its aura surged into the sky. A frost demonic python, freezing the sky. A silver-winged demon condor flapped its wings, evil and unparalleled. The last Bion spread its wings and circled, ferocious and ferocious, as if it wanted to tear the sky into pieces. The five beast phantoms appeared, and the wind and clouds surged. With a terrifying momentum, they directly suppressed the black scimitar to the point where it could not move at all. Crack! The five-colored scimitar was like a five-colored thunderbolt. It directly descended, and the black scimitar was like tofu. It was immediately cut in half, and then it shattered inch by inch. Pucci, at the same time, the mysterious man in the black robe did not even have time to react before he spat out a mouthful of blood. The middle-grade Dao artifact could not withstand a single blow and directly turned into nothingness. A middle-grade Dao artifact could not withstand a single blow. That five-colored scimitar was so powerful, it was the Emperor of Sabers. Buzz buzz. At this moment, the talisman weapons and spirit weapons refined by the surrounding talisman masters all let out the sound of wind and thunder in agreement, as if they were crawling, afraid, and respecting him as the Emperor. Around the square, everyone watched this scene and trembled. That five-colored scimitar, who could compare to it? Weapon Emperor Xiaofeng. One after another, cheers resounded through the clouds. In this great weapon city, which had a special meaning for weapon refinement, the mysterious young man's figure was imprinted in everyone's hearts at this moment. Good, good, good. Elder Zhuxiu trembled and repeatedly said good. He was so excited that he could not say anything else. The mysterious man in the black robe raised his head and looked at Du Xiaofu, who was in the air. His eyes under the hood shot out a cold light as he said in a cold voice, "Xiaofeng, I will remember you. I don't care who you are. You also remember that the Migres Palace has always been the holy land of talisman masters. The disciples of the Migres Palace are all outstanding existences among the talisman masters. You can't withstand a single blow." Du Xiaofu opened his mouth, and his voice echoed inside and outside the great weapon city. Good job. At this moment, all the disciples of the Migres Palace were boiling with excitement. The Migres Palace's face was not lost. That young man called Xiao Feng had ruthlessly trampled on the mysterious man in the black robe with the refining techniques of the Migres Palace. Good. See you again. The mysterious man in the black robe sneered. His aura fluctuated, and he was about to leave. Wanna leave? Stay here first. The Myriad Weapon Convention is not a place where you can come and go as you please. Du Xiaofu looked at the mysterious man in the black robe and shouted coldly, "Kid, what do you want?" The man in the black robe turned around. His eyes were cold and smiling. 7-star talisman masters are not allowed to participate in the Myriad Weapon Convention. Otherwise, according to the rules of the convention, a light punishment would be expulsion from the convention, and a heavy punishment would be crippling one's cultivation. Du Xiaofu said word by word, "Kid, what do you mean?" The mysterious man in the black robe was stunned, and his eyes started to flicker. "What I mean is very simple. You have long stopped being a 6-star talisman master. You have violated the rules of the Myriad Weapon Convention, disturbed the convention, and offended the Migres Palace. I think it is enough to cripple your cultivation," Du Xiaofu said coldly. The eyes under the mask started to suffuse with coldness. That man in the black robe is a 7-star talisman master? That's a violation of the rules. No wonder he was so arrogant at the beginning. The crowd around the square was in an uproar. At the judges' seats, Elder Zhu Shito, weapon addict Guang Hongwang, Elder Yun Ziqin, Elder Yin Xuanlong, and the others all looked at each other, and their expressions changed. The man in the black robe stared at Du Xiaofu, but the corner of his eyes swept across the judges' seats with fear. He suddenly laughed coldly. This kid, you say that I am a 7-star talisman master. There is no proof. What right do you have to question me, and what right do you have to suspect me? I think I have the right." Du Xiaofu took a deep breath and looked indifferently at the extravagant man in the black robe. He said, "I think that, on behalf of my master, Weapon Sovereign, no one will think that I don't have the right." His indifferent voice resounded in the square, clearly landing in everyone's ears.